Chapter 654. Actually, Qin Yining's suggestion was the most appropriate way to solve the current situation. If the person here was not Pang Xiao, but any other ordinary man, they would probably agree. At most, they would just leave more people to protect them. However, Pang Xiao and Qin Yining had been through so many ups and downs together. He had even lost her before. Now, in his heart, Qin Yining was more important than any appointment or imperial edict. You don't have to think too much. I don't agree, Pang Xiao said seriously. I know how to deal with your majesty. No matter what, I will not let you and the child out of my sight. Seeing Pang Xiao frowning and pursing his lips unhappily, Qin Yining smiled and said, "All right, since you have already made arrangements, I will listen to you." Qin Yining did not continue to persuade him to leave first. This made Pang Xiao's frown relax. Pang Xiao said, "Then it's settled. Let's rest here now. I will also send people to scout ahead and make the initial preparations. This way, we won't be in the dark when we arrive at the old capital. Also, I will need some time to gather information. During this time, you just need to take care of your body. Once you have recovered, you can continue to help me come up with plans." Qin Yining laughed and said, "You have Mr. Su, Mr. Xia, and so many other aides. It will not be my turn to come up with plans for you. That's different." Pang Xiao said, "You are wholeheartedly doing this for me. Also, you are extremely intelligent. You have inherited all my father-in-law's teachings. Mr. Xia, Mr. Su, and the others all admire you. If you recover quickly, you will be able to help me a lot." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. He knew that Pang Xiao was mostly coaxing her, but he still felt happy. Since Pang Xiao had made a decision, she knew what she was doing. Qin Yining didn't want to be separated from Pang Xiao either. If she was with him, she would feel more secure. Therefore, she didn't mention letting Pang Xiao take up the post first. Instead, she focused on recuperating and taking care of her child. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Just as Qin Yining's body had almost recovered and Pang Xiao's group was preparing to continue their journey, in the capital of Dezhou, Li Qitian and Qin Huayuan received the news that Pang Xiao had 2 sons at the same time. On Li Qitian's side, although the Empress was also pregnant, even if the Empress could give birth to a male heir, the good news would still come later than Pang Xiao's side. They were twins, and many people were envious of them. Li Qitian held a breath in his heart and didn't have a good expression these days. Even the Empress Dowager and Li Helan had to think carefully before speaking when they saw him, so as to avoid encountering Li Qitian's taboo. The Empress also noticed Li Qitian's abnormality, but she wasn't angry about it. She just focused on recuperating. Chapter 655. Qin Yining sympathized with Bing Tang's family. Furthermore, Bing Tang was loyal to her. When she snatched Bing Tang from Prince Ning, Qin Yining did not treat her as a servant at all. She had no other choice but to treat her as a sister in her heart. Bing Tang had helped her a lot. Qin Yining was a person who knew how to repay kindness. Other than arranging Bing Tang's future, she also wanted to make up for the regrets of Bing Tang's family so that Bing Tang would not always worry about them. Bing Tang naturally understood Qin Yining's good intentions. Qin Yining's character was trustworthy. He had never disappointed her. Qin Yining treated her as a sister. Bing Tang was the same. "All right, let's not argue about this. You still have 2 young masters to take care of. Besides, it's not like we don't have other subordinates. We can just ask someone else to do this." As Qin Yining listened, she thought of Huzi and looked at Bing Tang. She decided to give Huzi a chance to perform. "What you said makes sense. Why don't I ask Huzi to watch the subordinates do this?" Bing Tang's face instantly turned red. She said awkwardly, princess consort, how can you associate everything with that idiot? If he does this, I'll be worried. Qin Yining suppressed his smile and admired Bingtang's awkward expression. Don't say that. I think Huzi is a good person. He's not stupid and cares about you. If you let him do this, he'll definitely do a better job than others. Bingtang knew what Qin Yining said. However, every time Qin Yining used this to tease her, she felt embarrassed. She also knew that Huzi cared about her. However, she had been with Qin Yining for a long time and had seen how Pang Xiao treated Qin Yining. Now, for the sake of Qin Yining, she even made the decision to kill herself. She felt even more emotional and envious of the relationship between Pang Xiao and Qin Yining. As a doctor, Bingtang's view on life and death was different from ordinary people. Now that she had this realization, she naturally had higher expectations of Huzi. Although he was a good choice, Bingtang did not want to casually take a step forward. Qin Yining saw the change in Bing's expression and understood a little. So he did not continue discussing this matter. At this moment, Pang Xiao, who was walking at the front of the group, gradually stopped his horse and waved his hand behind him. The group immediately stopped. The bodyguards and Jinghu Wei who were escorting them all looked solemn. Their movements were uniform and majestic. Facing Pang Xiao and his group, Yu Qiyan and the old officials of the Yan dynasty could not help but feel a sense of fear. Their memories of Xiao Yong from the Tiger Army were still fresh and unforgettable. The pain of losing their country was almost equivalent to having their flesh and blood dug out. How could they not feel any resentment in their hearts? Yu Qiyan pursed his lips and looked at Pang Xiao. The imposing aura that was fierce to the point that it seemed like a sharp blade that had been unsheathed in the past was nowhere to be seen. Now, he seemed like a fine young master, and he was especially amiable. How have you been, Jinan Wang? Pang Xiao cupped his hands. Yu Qiyan wanted to tear apart Pang Xiao's proud face, but he still had to maintain his composure. He gritted his teeth and squeezed out a smile. Prince Zhongshuan, long time no see. Yes, long time no see. There was some delay on the road. Sorry to keep Jinan Wang waiting. Don't mention it. Prince Zhongshuan brought the women with him. There was some delay on the road. Yu Qiyan couldn't help but look at Qin Yining. From a close distance, Qin Yining, who was wearing a snow-white fox fur coat, looked even more beautiful. After giving birth to 2 sons, she became more plump and exuded a delicate charm from head to toe. When she turned her watery eyes, there seemed to be little stars in them. Yu Qiyan's heartbeat was just like before. When he met Qin Yining's eyes, his heart skipped a beat. Qin Yining nodded in greeting. Jinan Wang. He looked behind Yu Qiyan and greeted, Old Master Gu, Master Zhao, and Master Gu. While Yu Qiyan was mesmerized, Gu Shixiang and the others were extremely embarrassed. Qin Yining was Qin Huayuan's daughter. Qin Huayuan was once the Grand Preceptor. When Yu Qiyan took them away, he didn't take Qin Huayuan with him. This was Gu Shixiang's idea. He firmly believed that since Qin Yining had married Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan was no longer reliable. In their hearts, they had already regarded Qin Huayuan as a traitor. It would be fine if everything went smoothly after they left. Chapter 656. In the end, Gu Shixiang was an old man. After he left the capital to help the Yu Qiyan find the treasure, everyone in the Gu family, including his beloved granddaughter, were tortured to death by Li Qitian. Now, he was all alone. His hatred for Dezhou was almost tangible. His eyes were like knives as he glanced at Qin Yining. His hatred covered up the slight guilt he felt towards Qin Huayuan. His anger was even more obvious when he was faced with Qin Yining, who had severely tricked him in the matter of the treasure. He was more open-minded than the Yuchi Yen. Even if their efforts were in vain, this was still the land of the Dian dynasty. The people here had almost no sense of belonging to Dezhou. In their hearts, they believed that they were people of the Yen dynasty. Therefore, when the Yuchi Yen came back and called for help, many people and Jianghu people responded. Gu Shixiang didn't think that Pang Shao and Qin Yining had the ability to win over the people's hearts. Not bad. Prince Zhongshuan actually still remembers us old officials. I thought that Princess Consort was now wholeheartedly loyal to her husband's family and regarded us as scourges. You're joking. Qin Yining smiled and was extremely polite to Gu Shixiang. You're still as humorous as before. Your body is still so healthy. They began to chat. Gu Shixiang sneered, don't worry. My old bones can still withstand the torment. Pang Shao saw that Gu Shixiang's malice and anger were about to materialize. He hurriedly blocked Qin Yining behind him and responded to Gu Shixiang with a smile, Old Master Gu is healthy. Your Majesty can rest assured. When you left the capital, Your Majesty specifically told me that Old Master Gu is an old official and should be treated well. There's no reason for you to run around outside and tire yourself out. Gu Shixiang became vigilant, I'm used to suffering. I don't care about these things. I run around for our emperor. Zhenan Wang. It's nothing. It shouldn't be like this. Pang Shao sighed softly. Yuchi Yen was alarmed. He looked helplessly at Pang Shao. Pang Shao said gently with a smile, Old Master Gu is old. After you left the capital, there were even rumors that you died. Your Majesty was very sad when he heard this. Now that you are well, and His Majesty misses you very much, His Majesty intends to prepare a carriage to escort you back to the capital to enjoy your old age. No. Gu Shixiang of Zhenan, said anxiously, Darren, you can't go. Pang Shixiang of Yuchi Zhenan Wang Yining looked Zhenan Wang. As the leader of the ministers of the Yen dynasty, he was still careless and spoke without thinking. He had completely lost the demeanor of a leader. Zhenan Wang, Pang Shao's tone was as gentle as the spring breeze. But in Yuchi Yan's eyes, he was like a snake with its tongue out, waiting for an opportunity to bite his throat. Yuchi Yan's expression was ugly. However, he was much more mature than before. He knew that he had to maintain his dignity in front of the enemy. The Yuchi Yan said, Old Master Gu is this king's father-in-law. Old Tai, our family members are no longer around. As the son-in-law, this king naturally has the responsibility to take care of Old Master Gu until his death. Gu Shixiang was now his think tank. Without Gu Shixiang by his side, Yuchi Yen would have no confidence or plan for the future. Although the people in the city were on Dian's side now, they might not be able to firmly support him. After all, the people of the old capital still remembered the famine years ago. His father, who the people called a fatuous ruler, actually took the taxes and ran away from the capital, leaving them to fend for themselves. The people had a sense of belonging to Dian, but they hated the fatuous royal family. If Gu Shixiang was not by his side to encourage him and help him make decisions, Yuchi Yen would not be able to imagine his future. Pang Shao looked at Yuchi Yen with a smile. Zhenan Wang is right. It is human nature. Yuchi Yan's eyes lit up. He did not expect Pang Shao to be so easy to talk to. Pang Shao continued, however, Your Majesty's words are imperial edicts. As subjects, you and I should not disobey imperial edicts. Yuchi Yan's smile froze on his face. The hatred in Yuchi Yan's heart surged like a tidal wave. He had already become like this. Could it be that he could not even protect Gu Shixiang? Laws and principles are nothing more than human feelings. Since your majesty is a wise ruler, you should empathize with your subjects' feelings. Yu Qi gnashed her teeth when she said the word subjects, the anger in her chest almost spewing out from her mouth and nose. Pang Shao smiled. South-guarding king, don't worry. Your majesty is something none of us can change at once. How about this? Since you wish for old Master Gu to stay by your side, this king will send a letter to your majesty and put in a few good words for you to see if you can keep old Master Gu. Would Pang Shao be so kind? Yu Qi looked at Pang Shao suspiciously. Pang Shao laughed. South-guarding king, you don't believe me. This king has no reason to lie about such matters. The people around Yu Qi looked at each other. Some of them had already begun to change their impression of Pang Shao. At the very least, this person wasn't an unreasonable person who would kill with a glare. Yu Qi was also a little dazed. Did Pang Shao not know what had happened between him and Qin Yining? Based on this point alone, Pang Shao wouldn't be kind to him at all. Did the sun rise from the west? Would Pang Shao be so kind? Qin Yining watched quietly from the side, and he couldn't help but laugh in his heart. This time, they came to the Yan dynasty to stabilize the situation in the south and give the north some buffer time to prevent both the north and the south from being caught in a war. Pang Zhao's ruckus had diverted the attention of these people elsewhere. At least now, when they were making a decision, they didn't have time to consider the situation in Dezhou that was being attacked from both sides. Their thoughts had already been led away by Pang Zhao's few words. If your majesty can understand, then this king's heart of allegiance will not be in vain. Yu Qi gritted his teeth and told himself that a great man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. As long as he could keep Gu Shixiang alive, he still had a chance to turn things around in the future. Thinking of this, Yu Qi regained his smile and bowed stiffly to Pang Shao. Pang Shao smiled and returned the bow. Don't worry. This king is the great general, and you are the Zhenan king. We still have to work together in the future and defend this place together. There are many things that we can help each other in. It's just a letter, and it doesn't take much effort. It's not worth it. The atmosphere had changed from a state of mutual hostility and hatred when they first met, to the current state where Yu Qi was asking for help from others. A minister beside Yu Qi suggested, Prince Zhongshuan must be tired from the journey. Why don't you go into the city and settle down first? Yu Qi nodded. I've already prepared a side hall for you to rest in. Side hall. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Pang Shao immediately understood. Chapter 657. Yu Qi moved into the palace because he was once the last emperor of the Yan dynasty. The old capital had changed from the capital of the Yan dynasty to a large city in the south of Dezhou. Naturally, the palace was left unused. But even if the imperial palace had been left unused, who would be so bold as to live in the former imperial palace of an enemy country? Yu Qi had nothing to fear. After all, he felt a sense of belonging when he returned to the old capital of the Dayan. He didn't do well as an emperor, but his pride as an emperor was no less than anyone else's. His loyal subjects also held him up high. Naturally, he felt at ease living in the old palace. But Pang Shao couldn't. If he dared to live in the palace with Yu Qi today, Li Qitian would accuse him of disloyalty and punish him for violating the rules. Moreover, Yu Qi and Gu Shixiang had been traveling for a long time. This time, they arrived at the old capital around the same time. This didn't mean that the Yu Qi couldn't order people to come to the old capital to set things up. The palace was the most heavily guarded place in the world. This could be seen from how he and Ji Ziyu's private soldiers were able to use the geographical advantage to resist the rebel army. If he lived in the palace, it would give the enemy a chance to ambush him. What should he do if he was trapped in the palace? Pang Shao was skilled and bold. Naturally, he didn't care about these things. But he couldn't ignore the safety of Qin Yining and his two children. This king shouldn't refuse Shannon Wang's good intentions. Pang Shao was full of smiles. He looked as if he didn't care about the old grudges. There was a hint of regret in his eyes. This king has been appointed as the Grand Marshal. Now that this king is here, he naturally has to live in the barracks. There are many things in the barracks that this king needs to deal with. If he lives in the palace, it wouldn't be appropriate. I hope Shannon Wang can forgive him. Was it really so? Yu Qiyan smiled, and in her heart, she praised Gu Shixiang's ability a little more. All of this was really not beyond her expectations. Yu Qiyan followed Gu Shixiang's words and said, Prince Zhongshuan is right. However, the military camp was an important place. Wang Yi was naturally free to come and go, but women were not allowed to come and go as they pleased. Moreover, this king has heard that the real Prince Zhongshuan's consort has just given birth to twins. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for the women and children to be in the barracks. For the sake of your wife and children, Wang Yi asks that you consider this king's suggestion. Moreover, the palace has already made all the necessary preparations. We definitely won't let this king's consort and young master suffer. Pang Shao smiled. Yu Qiyan had really improved. He was so nervous just now, but now he could still recite what Gu Shixiang told him. It seemed that after many twists and turns, Yu Qiyan had still improved. If only he could hide his complacency at the success of his scheme a little deeper. Pang Shao pretended not to notice and said with a smile, Shannon Wang is considerate. This king is naturally assured. However, this time, I can only disappoint your majesty's good intentions. Qin Yining had been watching the exchange from the side. He had already analyzed the pros and cons in his heart. He said in a timely manner, Wang Yi is right. My family is also here. If Wang Yi goes to the barracks, I also want to go home and live for a period of time. Although Qin Yining had been attacked by bandits and many buildings had been burned to the ground, after Qin Yining went to Dezhou, Master Zhong made the decision to buy the residence back and renovate it. At this time, the residence was of course under Qin Yining's name. Qin Huaiyuan, the Sun clan, and the old matriarch didn't know about it. Ever since Yu Qiyan heard Qin Yining speak, his eyes were fixed on her face. Thinking of their past, Yu Qiyan's heart was filled with all sorts of feelings. At that time, he was still a high and mighty emperor. He could choose any of the beauties in the imperial harem. But now, his country was destroyed and his family was destroyed. He became the ruler of a fallen country. His infamy was forever recorded in the annals of history. He even lost his empress and concubines for a treasure that he didn't get. Qin Yining was an eternal pain and scar in his heart. Especially now that she was still smiling like a flower, but she was speaking for someone else. Her heart could no longer be thinking about him, nor could it be for his country. Her heart was for someone else. She even gave birth to a child for the main culprit who destroyed the Dian dynasty, and it was a twin. In a flash, Yu Qiyan had thought a lot. His love for Qin Yining didn't decrease, but his resentment towards her didn't decrease either. Yu Qiyan naturally didn't understand Qin Yining's countless twists and turns. He didn't want to understand. Seeing that Yu Qiyan was in a daze and didn't speak, Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh softly. Yu Qiyan still hadn't changed. He was still the same as before. It seemed like he would never learn how to behave in any situation. Pang Shao took half a step forward in displeasure and stood in front of Qin Yining. This person didn't have any sense of propriety. He actually dared to stare at Qin Yining. Others could forget, but he couldn't. Back then, Qin Yining had almost become the empress of the Yu Qiyan. Now, it seemed that Yu Qiyan still hadn't given up. If it wasn't for the fact that Pang Shao still had some sense and knew that now wasn't the time to shed all pretense of cordiality with Yu Qiyan, he would have already slapped him. Yu Qiyan's line of sight was blocked by Pang Zhao's body. He coughed softly to hide his embarrassment. He didn't dare to continue looking at Qin Yining. His mind was a mess. He gathered all his strength to say, "What you said makes sense." Behind Yu Qiyan, Gu Shixiang almost wanted to scold Yu Qiyan for his stupidity on the spot. How could he let go of such a good opportunity so easily? If he missed this opportunity, it would be even more difficult to trick Pang Shao and his group again. Was he so mesmerized by a woman that he even forgot her name? Wang Yi. Gu Shixiang took a big step forward and said in a slightly displeased tone, "Prince Zhongshuan and Princess Consort came from afar. If we let them go back to the barracks like this, wouldn't people say that Wang Yi is neglecting visitors from afar?" Yu Qiyan quickly nodded, "That's exactly what I meant." It seemed that they treated the old capital as their own territory. "That's right. Didn't your majesty give Yu Qiyan a few of the rebellious prefectures as his fiefdoms?" His sense of belonging wasn't without reason. Pang Shao sneered in his heart, but he still politely refused on the surface. Gu Shixiang's face became serious. "Prince Zhongshuan, could it be that you look down on our Jinan Wang? Is that why you're refusing like this? We all serve the court and guard the south. Does Prince Zhongshuan really want to be enemies with the Jinan Wang? If your majesty knew about this, he would be unhappy." "I'm afraid he won't be happy." Qin Yining narrowed his eyes. Old Master Gu wasn't someone who could do well in front of an incapable ruler of Dian. Old Master Gu's ability to act shamelessly was top-notch. However, this was a conversation between men, and Qin Yining wasn't in a position to interrupt. Otherwise, he would have to trick him again so that he wouldn't have the energy to delay Pang Zhao's work. The two sides were in a deadlock, and the situation turned ugly. Chapter 658. Pang Shao had always been a man of his word. In the military camp, all the orders were military orders, and no one could disobey them. Today, he was willing to discuss with the Yu Qiyan for so long, which was already giving the Yu Qiyan enough face. Although they were here to maintain stability, they couldn't blindly endure and give in. Otherwise, wouldn't the other party take advantage of them? Although Pang Shao was smiling, his phoenix eyes were slightly narrowed, forming an invisible pressure. The Yu Qiyan hated Pang Shao, but more than that, he was afraid. This was the pressure of destroying a dynasty, and it was impossible to resist. It was like a person facing an angry ocean alone. Yu Qiyan forced himself to calm down, but his eyes didn't dare to meet Pang Zhao's gaze. This is also good, then." Gu Shixiang hurriedly interrupted Yu Qiyan. "It seems that Prince Zhongshuan still has some repulsion towards our Jinan Wang." Pang Shao narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Old Master Gu is old. Actually, according to your majesty's wishes, it's also good for you to return to the capital to recuperate." This was clearly a blatant threat. Gu Shixiang had followed the Yu Qiyan all the way until now. Before the Dian dynasty was restored, how could he abandon the Yu Qiyan? With Yu Qiyan's intelligence, if he wasn't there, he could peel off the skin and break the bones in the blink of an eye. Gu Shixiang changed the topic and said, "Then we'll follow Prince Zhongshuan's wishes. We are all officials of the same court, so we should be united against a common enemy. There's no need to harm the harmony over such a small matter." His face changed faster than flipping through a book. He said everything, and only he could pull down his face. Qin Yining cursed in his heart. He followed Pang Zhao's instructions and returned to the carriage. He lifted the curtains and observed the construction of the city and the lives of the people on the way, and headed towards the palace. Before getting out of the car, Qin Yining whispered to Bing Tang and Ji Yun, "When we enter the palace later, you have to be extra careful. I'm worried that this is a trap and the two children will be hurt. Don't worry, Wang Fei. We'll definitely protect Gu Huo. We won't let anyone take advantage of us. Qin Yining nodded in relief. With you guys around, of course I'm not worried. Moreover, Qin Yining did not believe that the Yuqi Yan could do anything to them with the Jinghu Wei brought by Pang Shao. It was nothing more than entering the palace for a banquet and putting on a show. The carriage moved forward with the procession. Listening to the rolling of the wheels and the creaking of bumps, the streets and palace walls that Qin Yining was familiar with gradually came into view. Most of her time was spent outside with her foster mother. Later on, she went to the mountains. In terms of time, she had not lived in the capital for very long. But after returning to the Qin Fu, the days of danger had allowed her to gradually adapt to her new identity and integrate into her current life. She had lived in the Qin manor and in the capital city. She remembered every step she had taken. Pang Shao did not feel much when she came to the old capital, but Qin Yining only felt a sense of familiarity. When Pang Shao was trapped in the underground palace, Qin Huayuan had once discussed with Qin Yining that if she left the capital in the future, the place she wanted to go the most was her hometown. Right now, Pang Shao was fine. Zhao Gu and Han Gu had been safely born. Her hope was still to return to her hometown and live a peaceful life. But Qin Yining also knew that these expectations were hard to achieve for someone like Pang Shao, who was destined to be extraordinary. There were no longer any imperial guards standing in front of the palace gates. There were only 2 guards standing there. The vermilion gates were wide open. The palace roads were silent and empty. Everything was bleak and lonely. Everyone entered the palace. The Jinghu Wei at Pang Zhao's side followed orders and left one person at every set distance. When they came to the side hall where the banquet was being held, Qin Yining and Pang Shao still had 6 Jinghu Wei at their side. They were their personal servants, wet nurses, and older women. Qin Yining looked at the surroundings and confirmed that this was not one of the central halls of the imperial palace. He thought to himself that the Yuqi Yan still had some propriety. At least, he was not so foolish as to use the main hall to receive guests. Thinking about it, if the Yuqi Yan wanted to live here and had limited servants, he could not live in his original bedroom, right? Wang Yi, Wang Fei, this way please. The Yuqi Yan and Gu Shixiang led a few old officials of the Yan dynasty to warmly lead the way. They pointed to a side room and said, "This room can be used for Wang Fei and the young master to rest." How could Qin Yining leave Pang Zhao's line of sight? He immediately smiled and said, "No need for such trouble. I also want to take the children to see more." As though he understood Qin Yining's thoughts, the Yuqi Yan felt a bit lonely and felt wronged at being suspected. He coughed lightly and said, "The host follows the guest's wishes. This way please." From the Yuqi Yan's tone, he really did think of this place as his own home. Qin Yining shook his head inwardly. He turned around and followed the wet nurse and Bing Tang into the side hall behind Pang Zhao's group. This side hall was naturally much simpler than the palace where the emperor and empress lived. The lighting was not very bright either. The setting sun in the winter shone in through the water chestnut flower windows that were covered with bright paper. One could even see the fine dust particles floating in the air. After the Yuqi Yan entered, the servants immediately got to work. They lit the hanging palace lanterns and brought in a heater and charcoal brazier. Soon, the hall warmed up. Qin Yining let out a sigh of relief. She was also worried that it would be too cold and her 2 sons would freeze. Wang Yi, this way please. This way please. The Yuqi Yan and Pang Shao had already modestly taken their seats. Gu Shixiang and the other old officials of the Yan dynasty also sat around the square table according to their status. Qin Yining was a woman and had a child with her. Naturally, it was not appropriate for her to sit with them. She brought the servants to an exit room separated by a beaded curtain. Huzi brought Jinghu Wei and naturally guarded Qin Yining's side. Pang Xiao and Yu Qiyan exchanged pleasantries. Although he was filled with a domineering and murderous aura from fighting on the battlefield, if he sincerely wanted to make friends, he could also make people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze. Pang Xiao did not take the initiative to talk about state affairs, nor did he talk about the actual state affairs that Yu Qiyan was not proficient in. Instead, he talked about calligraphy and painting with him. He talked about the famous calligraphers of the past, and also about who had the best calligraphy and painting in the present age. At first, Yu Qiyan was still thinking that he could not be fooled by Pang Xiao and let his guard down. But when Yu Qiyan came to the south, he had been working hard to do those things that he was not good at under pressure. Now that he met someone he could talk to, and they were talking about topics that he was interested in, he could not hold back his words, and the conversation became more and more enthusiastic. In the end, Yu Qiyan's chatterbox was opened. His excited appearance made Gu Shixiang frown. Even the old officials beside Gu Shixiang could not stand it anymore. They frowned and shook their heads without saying anything. When Pang Xiao saw that Yu Qiyan was chatting happily and had let his guard down, he smiled and raised his cup to drink with him. He casually asked, "Why didn't I see General Deng today?" General Deng's name was Min Chang. He was the original commander of the army. Chapter 659. When Yu Qiyan put down his wine cup, he heard Pang Xiao's words and said casually, "Oh, maybe something happened in the barracks. These days, ahem." Gu Shixiang coughed violently, interrupting Yu Qiyan's unfinished words. Yu Qiyan suddenly came back to his senses and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He looked at Pang Xiao, who was still smiling in front of him, as if he had seen a ghost. Too insidious. Pang Xiao, this guy, actually took advantage of his relaxed vigilance to get information from him. Yu Qiyan was filled with resentment and self-reproach, almost doubting herself. Did he really not have the talent to be an emperor? How could he be so easily swayed by Pang Xiao's words? How could he answer whatever Pang Xiao asked? Pang Xiao didn't intend to get anything out of Yu Qiyan. If Yu Qiyan really said something, Pang Xiao would be surprised. He just wanted to see Yu Qiyan's attitude. Now that he saw it, he could be sure that something had happened in the barracks. It was just a reference. However, Yu Qiyan almost blurted out the truth, which surprised and amused Pang Xiao. He couldn't believe that there was such a real person among the people who played with power. It seems that General Deng is tied up with military affairs. Pang Xiao said with a smile, "This is normal. The reception is secondary. The most important thing is that the military affairs can't be delayed. We are all people who work for your majesty, so this situation is understandable." Gu Shixiang was already very worried, but he still smiled flawlessly. "Prince Zhongshuan is right. We are all people who work for your majesty with all our hearts. We don't need to care about these ostentatious things." Hearing this, everyone present looked at Pang Xiao in unison. Pang Xiao pretended that he didn't hear Gu Shixiang's insinuation that he was too ostentatious and didn't do his best for your majesty. He then chatted with Yu Qiyan again. However, Yu Qiyan was now on guard. Now, he was like a frightened rabbit. Whatever he chatted about, he seemed to be thinking about whether he should say something or not. His hands and feet were tied, and he was so timid that people who saw him felt that he was ungentlemanly. Pang Xiao did not care. After all, these Dain officials were not his people. The Yu Qiyan was behaving in such a manner. Was he not afraid that his subordinates would reconsider their options? Thinking of this, Pang Xiao could not help but sigh. Fortunately, Gu Shixiang did not abandon the Yu Qiyan. Otherwise, with his intelligence, he would have been eaten alive. Qin Yining was in the room with the two children, listening to the conversation outside. He could see everything clearly through the beaded curtains. Yu Qiyan did not have any women by his side, and Qin Yining refused to use the maidservants that Yu Qiyan had arranged. There were no outsiders by his side, so it was more convenient for Qin Yining to listen to the news outside. Gradually, the sky darkened. The servants lit up a few more lamps in the room, and the charcoal in the braziers was replaced with new ones. New Year's Eve was approaching. How could a brazier of charcoal be used to cool the damp and cold temperature of the old capital? Brother Zhao and Brother Han had been traveling with Qin Yining and Pang Xiao ever since they were 1 month old. Even if Qin Yining did his best to take care of them, they were still limited by their conditions. It was impossible for them to be as comfortable as they were at home. At this time, the two children were hungry. In addition, the hall was cold. Brother Han cried first. When Brother Zhao heard his younger brother cry, he also cried. The baby's loud cries echoed in the hall, causing Pang Xiao and the others who were talking to look in the direction of the room. Pang Xiao became worried and wanted to get up to check on the situation. However, the situation was not right. He was a man, so it was not good for him to always be around the children. Yu Qiyan, who had almost said the wrong thing just now, heard the wet nurse's voice coaxing the children behind the beaded curtains. His heart felt sour. He had already forgotten that Qin Yining had just given birth to Pang Xiao's children. However, the two children's loud cries were like a fierce slap to his face, pulling him back to reality. What did he have now? His throne had been taken away by the man in front of him twice. Now, he even had to be stationed in the south to oppose him. The hatred between them was already irreconcilable. How could he let down his guard? He had just been chatting happily with this person. Yu Qiyan sank into deep self-blame and guilt. Pang Xiao said at this time, "It's getting late. We should also take our leave." Yu Qiyan was not in a good mood. He said gloomily, "Wang Ye's young master seems to be unwell. Why don't we stay here for a night, so that the children won't suffer from the pain of the bumpy journey?" Yes. Gu Shixiang thought that Yu Qiyan was finally reliable for once. He also anxiously came forward to persuade, "It's freezing outside. It's not right to let the swaddling babies run back and forth. Besides, Wang Yi still has to go to the military camp, right? The princess consort is taking care of the two children. She can stay here to take care of them. If Pang Xiao really left Qin Yining and the children here, it would be sending them to the tiger's den. Wouldn't that be leaving them as hostages? No need. This king understands Shannon Wang's good intentions. In the future, we will both be officials in the old capital. If we want to meet again, there will be many opportunities in the future. One more time won't make a difference. Besides, my wife is a female. It's not good for her to stay here with the children." Pang Xiao stood up and cupped his hands to bid farewell. Then, he walked out forcefully. Qin Yining heard Pang Xiao's movements. He had already instructed the wet nurse to carry the twins and put them on properly before walking out. Yu Qiyan pursed her lips. Seeing the two of them together, jealousy was like a cluster of flames, burning in her heart. Thinking of Gu Shixiang's words, Yu Qiyan stepped forward and said, "Prince Zhongshuan really insists on letting down this king's good intentions." With this question, the atmosphere immediately turned cold. Hu Zi and Jinghu Wei immediately stood in formation and guarded Pang Xiao, Qin Yining, and the others. Ji Yun held the soft sword at her waist, ready to unsheath it at any time. Bing Tang clenched the small bag in his hand. Pang Xiao clasped his hands behind his back. His chin was slightly raised, his sword-like eyebrows slanted, and his phoenix eyes narrowed. He said arrogantly and unhappily, What, does Shannon Wang want to stop this king from taking the throne? Or does Shannon Wang want to snatch this king's wife and children? As soon as these words came out, it was tantamount to exposing Yu Qian's inner thoughts in front of everyone, tearing apart that layer of cloth covering his shame. Yu Qian originally thought this way. Yu Qian's face alternated between red and white. Pang Xiao suddenly laughed loudly and patted Yu Qian's shoulder with his big hand. It's just a joke. How can Shannon Wang be that kind of dirty person who covets his wife and children? What's more, Shannon Wang wholeheartedly cares for the people and the common people. He won't have the heart to start another war and let the common people suffer. This king understands Shannon Wang's thoughts the best. Don't you think this king is right? Yu Qian's shoulder was held by a pair of big hands that were like iron pincers. It was so painful that he almost tilted his body to avoid it. Now, he forced himself to hold on just to maintain his image. Moreover, Pang Xiao's martial strength and the people he arranged along the way were not weak. If they really fought, it would be fine to annihilate them all. If they couldn't and let the tiger return to the mountain, wouldn't it be waiting for Pang Xiao to kill them all? That wouldn't be worth the loss. Chapter 660. Qi Nining put on his cloak and smiled as he watched Pang Xiao and Yu Qian argue. Seeing that Yu Qian had relented, he didn't hesitate and walked out with his children. Pang Xiao followed closely behind. He politely said goodbye to his colleagues and followed Qi Nining. Huzi and the imperial bodyguards did not dare to relax or slack off in the slightest. Their muscles were so tense that they looked like leopards that could pounce and bite their prey at any time. They escorted Pang Xiao and the others out of the palace. After walking for a while, one person returned to the team, and the team of imperial bodyguards became bigger. Yu Qian and Gu Shixiang walked out with the others. They saw that Pang Xiao's elite soldiers were all tall and strong. The weapons in their hands flashed coldly under the light of the torches. They had some doubts about their plan to take down Pang Xiao today. Forget it. It was better not to make a move against this evil spirit now. Just as Pang Xiao had said, there was still a long way to go. As long as they were still in this area, they didn't have to worry about not finding a chance to make a move. The people here were all loyal to the Dayan. Thinking of this, Gu Shixiang's expression relaxed. Yu Qian had already restrained his thoughts of fighting Pang Xiao head-on. He walked them out of the palace with a calm expression. Qi Nining was nervous the entire way. When he reached the palace gates, he immediately let out a long breath. He turned around to look at the vermilion gates and said in a low voice, "Let's leave this place first. This palace is the place with the heaviest energy in history. Look, the children have stopped crying." Pang Xiao collected his thoughts and looked at his two sons, who were wearing tiger head hats, red jackets, and wrapped in big red quilts. He saw that their eyes were sparkling as they looked around curiously. Sure enough, they stopped crying. Pang Xiao clicked his tongue in wonder and then said, "It's cold. Let's hurry to the car. Don't let you and the children get cold." Qi Nining nodded and led the children into the carriage. Then, he deftly used Bing Tang to blow up the fire in the delicate charcoal stove. Pang Xiao didn't ride a horse this time. He sat in the carriage and sat side by side with Qi Nining. Ji Yun and the others got out of the car. Qi Nining was holding Brother Han in his arms. Before he got out of the Bing Tang, he stuffed Brother Han into Pang Xiao's arms. The two children grew prettier and prettier as they grew up. Moreover, they seemed to have been sensible since a young age. They never cried in the middle of the night and were especially considerate of Qi Nining and the wet nurse. At this moment, Brother Han grabbed the Pang Xiao's collar and looked around with his big round eyes. Brother Zhao closed his eyes and leaned on Qi Nining's shoulder as if he was about to fall asleep. Pang Shao chuckled and kissed her forehead again. I say, you sent out a lot of carrier pigeons along the way. Have you contacted Mr. Liao and the others? Yes. And since I'm here, I have to say hello to Grandma. When things settle down in the future, I can visit Grandma. My grandma isn't an ordinary person. When she was Duke Dinggua's wife, she was an expert. The men in Duke Dinggua's residence were all gone, but she was able to take care of the old, weak, women, and children and survive. She even became the alliance leader of the Qingtian alliance to avenge my grandfather and uncles. During this period of time, I went to the capital with you. In fact, grandmother secretly helped me a lot with the development of my fields and industries in the south. Speaking of this, Qin Yining smiled proudly, don't worry. After all, I'm a local bully. You really don't have to leave all the people for me to use. If you take Jinghu Wei with you, I'll be more at ease. I won't have to worry about you all the time. Pang Zhao's heart was about to melt into a puddle of water. She was so sensible and obedient that he didn't have to worry about her. She was also very capable. Even without him, she could still take care of things on her own. How could he be so lucky to be able to marry her? Pang Shao held the child in one hand and his wife in the other. His body swayed slightly with the bumpy movement of the carriage. His entire body was immersed in laziness. Sister Yi, you're so good. That kind of happiness couldn't be described with words. Qin Yining understood Pang Zhao's meaning. He smiled and said, don't worry, our days will be better in the future. Yes. I believe in you. The group of people returned to the old family Qin residence. After the renovation, the Qin mansion now looked brand new. However, in the huge mansion, there were no longer any members of the Qin clan from before. Only a few old servants were left to look after the house. Pang Shao held Qin Yining's hand and walked into the residence with the help of the lanterns carried by the guards. He said with a smile, where do you plan to live? Do you want to live in the Shuoran pavilion where father-in-law used to live, or in the snow pear courtyard where you lived when you just returned to the residence? Chapter 661. Is there anything about you that I don't know? Pang Shao smiled proudly and whispered into Qin Yining's ear, when I first saw you, I even touched you. At the mention of this, Qin Yining couldn't help but think back to the days when he had just returned to the Fu. Now that he was revisiting the old place, things had remained the same, but people had changed. The lecher who had scared her half to death had now become her husband and cared for her greatly. Wasn't this the best arrangement of fate? Qin Yining laughed and asked Pang Shao, I remember that you still have my hairpin. Pang Shao had plucked it from her head and stolen it. Pang Shao smiled and nodded, yes, but don't think about taking it back. If I steal it, it's mine. You really are a bandit. Qin Yining scolded him, but the smile on his face grew wider and wider. The depressing atmosphere on the road just now had been swept away. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou all followed behind Qin Yining and Pang Shao. Hearing their words, they all thought back to when they had first come to Qin Yining's side. They couldn't help but smile. Qin Yining followed Pang Shao. Together, they carried the child through the Yi Gate and around the former Ci Shao garden. On the left was a path paved with square bricks. At the end was the snow pear courtyard that was closest to the Qin Fu. That was where Qin Yining had lived when he had first returned to the Fu. In the garden on the right, under the quiet moonlight, only the light on the surface of the lake could be seen. A pavilion stood quietly by the lake. That was the courtyard of the Shuoran pavilion where Qin Huayuan had once lived. Qin Yining saw that the Shuoran pavilion had almost been restored to its original appearance after the renovation. He immediately thought of the calamity that day. Thinking of Ruelan, who had sacrificed her life to protect him, tears immediately welled up. If it wasn't for Raylan that day, I would be long gone. Hearing Raylan, Chiu Lu lowered her head and secretly wiped away the tears in her eyes. She forced a smile and urged, Wang Fei, don't say that. It's this servant's good fortune that you think of Raylan. Besides, you've been taking care of Raylan's family. Raylan is very loyal. She'll be happy to see you living well. Qin Yining shook his head, tears rolling down his cheeks. It wasn't just Raylan. There was also the dead third aunt, as well as 6th Miss Qin Shuangning and 7th Miss Qin Anning. The twin sisters were both at the age of flowers. Even if there was a little friction between them, they would quarrel over a bowl of swallow's nest. But in the end, neither of them had committed a heinous crime. Furthermore, what had the young Qin Xian done wrong? Eldest cousin-in-law had always been gentle and uncompetitive. What did she do wrong? Not to mention those loyal servants who were dedicated to protecting their masters and sacrificing their lives for their master's family Qin. The winter night wind cooled the hot tears on his face. Qin Yining's eyes were blurred by his tears and he couldn't see the surrounding scenery clearly. Pang Xiao hugged her tenderly and patted her shoulder with his big hand. Don't cry. It's bad for your eyes. Look at Brother Han and Brother Zhao. Are they laughing at you? When we have time later, I'll accompany you to pay respects to them. We can also take care of their families. Sister Yi, don't cry, don't cry. Pang Xiao coaxed Qin Yining as if he was coaxing a child. Seeing him furrowing his brows and pursing his lips anxiously, as if he had encountered a major disaster, Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle at his clumsy appearance. His sadness was diluted by this. Qin Yining patted his shoulder and said in a low voice, I won't cry. Be careful not to be laughed at. Who would laugh at you? Pang Xiao pretended to be angry and looked back. The maidservants and attendants were looking at the night sky, the lake, and the tips of their shoes. They didn't look at them at all. Their uniform absent-mindedness was as fake as it could be. Qin Yining's face turned red and he quickly changed the topic. Snow Pear Courtyard is the right size for everyone to gather in one place. It's also close to the back door and the courtyard wall. If there's a situation, it'll be easy to go in and out. Let's stay in Snow Pear Courtyard. Okay. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining walked in front. The group of people walked along the corridor and arrived at Snow Pear Courtyard in a grandiose manner. The old servant in charge of looking after the courtyard opened the big lock hanging on the courtyard door and said with a smile, the courtyard and the room are cleaned frequently. It's just that the bedding is not complete. It's not a problem. We've brought it with us. Ji Yun arranged for the servants to tidy up the room. They moved the boxes and bedding, lit the fire, boiled the water, and wiped the floor. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Pang Xiao accompanied Qin Yining to coax the children in the inner room. When the charcoal basin was brought into the room, it gradually warmed up. Pang Xiao then went to carefully check the defenses in the courtyard. Originally, he wanted to leave Jinghu Wei behind. However, Qin Yining strongly objected. In the end, Pang Xiao could only listen to her and leave 4 people behind to take care of Snow Pear Courtyard. He cooperated with Dahan and Jingzhe to take care of it. After confirming that there were no flaws in the shift, Pang Xiao returned to the room and said, Sister Yi, I'll take my leave first. Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, Don't worry, I'm here. Do your job well and pay attention to your safety. If there's any situation, send someone to inform me at any time. Don't make me worry. I know. You too. Pang Xiao leaned forward and planted a kiss on Qin Yining's forehead. He wanted to say goodbye, but he couldn't help kissing her nose bridge. Finally, he sucked on her soft lips and rubbed them with his teeth. This kiss wasn't deep, and it didn't contain any emotions. There was only a strong desire to cherish. When their lips parted, the two of them looked at each other at the same time. Their eyes only reflected each other's shadow. Pang Xiao sighed softly, "I'll do my best to do everything well. This way, I won't be forced to separate from you in the future. When the time comes, I'll bring you with me wherever I go. No one will criticize me behind my back, and I won't have to consider anyone's feelings." Although she knew that it was almost impossible to achieve what Pang Xiao said, Qin Yining still couldn't help but reveal a bright and beautiful smile. She nodded and said, "Okay, when the time comes, I'll bring the children and go sightseeing together." "Emin, be good." Pang Xiao kissed her cheek again. Seeing that it was already late at night and the two children had already fallen asleep in the cradle, it wouldn't be right to delay any longer. Pang Xiao finally left Qin Manor with Huzi and Jinghu Wei, and urged his horse to hurry towards the military camp. As the sound of the horse's hooves gradually faded away, Qin Yining slowly sighed. Seeing that everyone around him was a bit heavy, Qin Yining adjusted his mood and said with a smile, "All right, it's too late today. Everyone should go and have a good rest. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it tomorrow." "Yes." Everyone responded in unison. Xianyun stayed behind to take care of Qin Yining while he rested. The two wet nurses also stayed in the bedroom to take care of Brother Zhao and Brother Han. They had a good night's sleep and passed peacefully. The next morning, after Qin Yining took care of the two children, she ordered people to scout the military camp. In addition, she called Jingzhe to her side and said in a low voice, "You're familiar with this place. I want you to go out and find someone for me. Princess Consort, please tell me who to find." Chapter 662. Jingzhe returned in less than an hour, but he was alone. When he saw Qin Yining, he first bowed and then whispered to her, "Princess Consort, this subordinate has found head shopkeeper Xia. However, head shopkeeper Xia seems to be ill and is unwilling to see any guests." This subordinate passed on the message and came back to report. Qin Yining's beautiful brows furrowed. This matter was not right. When Qin Yining went to the capital of Dezhou that day, she brought along her most trusted master Zhong because she wanted to develop the situation in the north. In the south, all of her farmlands, shops, as well as the caravan and chow gang that transported grain and goods were already established. As long as the situation was stable, there was no need to develop. Moreover, the south was their base of operations after all, and Duchess Ding was looking after it. Therefore, Master Zhong recommended his most trusted assistant shopkeeper to Qin Yining to take over the matters in the south. Head shopkeeper Xia was over 40 years old and was at the age when men were the strongest and most stable. Qin Yining had always trusted him. Who would have thought that something like this would happen when she came today? Head shopkeeper Xia was not someone who did not know etiquette. It did not make sense that the shopkeeper under her would pretend not to know when she, as the owner, returned to the old capital in such a grandiose manner. Not only did he not take the initiative to greet her, but he also did not come when she sent someone to invite him. If head shopkeeper Xia was truly ill and could not get out of bed, then it would be fine. However, if he was not, then this matter would not be easy to deal with. "When you arrived, did anything strange happen in head shopkeeper Xiao's home?" Jingzhe thought carefully. He shook his head and said, "Head shopkeeper Xiao's servants did not have any abnormalities on their faces. There also did not seem to be anything wrong in the house. Presumably, nothing major had happened." "I understand. Thank you for making this trip. You can go and rest." Qin Yining nodded and politely thanked Jingzhe. Jingzhe was overwhelmed by the favor and repeatedly waved his hand, saying, "Working for Princess Consort is this subordinate's duty. Princess Consort, there is no need to be so courteous with this subordinate. This subordinate will take his leave." Jing Zhe bowed and slowly retreated. Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle when he saw how respectful he was. However, after laughing, Qin Yining fell into deep thought again. Shopkeeper Xiao's situation was indeed suspicious. This made Qin Yining think of Pang Xiao. Deng Minchang, who was supposed to visit Pang Xiao, did not appear. Instead, Pang Xiao had to rush to the barracks to check on the situation. Moreover, he did not know what the situation was like. He then asked, "How are the matters of the fields being handled?" Ji Yun carried a black tray with 2 beams into the room. She placed 2 white porcelain bowls on the square table next to Qin Yining and Master Zhong's hands. Then she bowed and retreated. Head shopkeeper Zhong nodded his head in greeting. When there was no one else in the room, he said in a low voice, "Wang Fei, to tell you the truth, I didn't have a good time visiting the other estates, so I didn't look carefully at the other 10 or so estates and our shops. I hurriedly came back to report to you. I was afraid of startling the snake." Qin Yining nodded in understanding and said, "It seems that there is a problem here. My side also did not go smoothly. The news that Wang Yi and I came should not be a secret. But head shopkeeper Xia did not come. I sent people to find him, but head shopkeeper Xia said he was sick and did not want to see us. I already had my suspicions. I did not think that it would be the same on your side." Master Zhong shook his head with some self-blame. "This matter was my negligence. At the time, I felt that the South was stable enough to be our support. After handing it to head shopkeeper Xia, I did not manage it. I only wanted to go to Jing with Wang Fei to settle down, expand, and buy a family business. I neglected the matters of the South. This is not your fault." Qin Yining comforted, "I know you did your best. Also, we are all in the capital of Dezhou. The distance from here is really high and far." "That's right, I told you to inform head shopkeeper Xia to report the situation in the city to me on the road. Did you inform him?" Master Zhong nodded and said, "I ordered people to send the letter as fast as possible." Qin Yining smiled thoughtfully. His fingers curled his long hair as he said, "This is interesting. After Master Zhong left the group, I did not receive a single letter, nor did anyone send a message. Clearly, head shopkeeper Xia has ignored my orders." Chapter 663. Qin Yining forced a smile as he comforted Master Zhong, "Don't worry, and don't get angry. We are managers who have experienced great storms. What kind of situation have we not seen? It's not important if we discover that something is wrong. We just have to solve the problem. It's not so complicated." She was the mistress. She could not panic when encountering a problem. Pang Xiao was not by her side right now. Xiaoyu, Su Weiji, and the other aides had gone with Pang Xiao to the military camp. She was the only one who could make decisions here. She warned herself not to have any negative emotions that would cause her to lose her cool. The best way to solve a problem was to deal with it calmly. But Master Zhong was not as open-minded as Qin Yining. "Boss, you're right. But head shopkeeper Xia is being too unreasonable. You had ordered them to send the news immediately. Not only did they not listen, they did not discuss with us when something happened. They are treating us as outsiders." The more Master Zhong spoke, the angrier he became. If it wasn't for the fear of scaring the 2 children next door, he would have flown into a rage. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Now that things have come to this, there is no use in getting angry. We should figure out what happened to cause head shopkeeper Xia to be so abnormal." Master Zhong saw that Qin Yining was so calm. His anger eased. Thinking back to his appearance just now, he couldn't help but feel embarrassed. He was already so old, but he was not as calm as a young girl. In the past, Qin Yining had easily saved Miss Tang from Ning Wang's hands and saved him from the fate of being sacrificed. Now that she was a mother, she was still the same as before. No one doubted her. Wang Fei. I was too agitated just now. Wang Fei, please do not blame me. Master Zhong stood and bowed apologetically. Qin Yining smiled and waved his hand. You were defending me. How can I blame you? Master Zhong smiled emotionally. Thinking of head shopkeeper Xiao's actions, he couldn't help but say worriedly, I'm just afraid that head shopkeeper Xiao will ally with the local people to harm Wang Yi and Wang Fei. Qin Yining nodded and said, I am also worried about this. Gathering the cloak around his shoulders, Qin Yining said helplessly, this is inevitable. We were all Yan people in the past and can understand this. Back then, even though the fatuous emperor was extremely ridiculous, and everyone wished that the fatuous emperor could die as soon as possible, so that the mountains and rivers could be cleansed, no one thought of quitting being a citizen of the Yan dynasty. His Highness was the one who conquered the great Yan dynasty at that time. He overcame all difficulties and killed his way to the capital city. He defeated the flag in the hearts of the people of Yan dynasty, Prince Ning. Then, he brought his army to the city and confronted him. Even though he never massacred anyone in the city, and never allowed his men to rape and pillage, everyone's fear of him was deeply rooted. Plus, when the capital city was besieged, there was a famine in the city. That's the reason. Master Zhong smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, I have also discovered this. Wang Yi has always been forced to take the blame. It is most likely the same now. Yes. Qin Yining sighed and said, it is fine that we know this. Wang Yi is not a stupid person. He will take care of the matters on his side. What you and I need to do is to solve all the problems on our own when Wang Yi has no time to care about other matters. It is best if we do not disturb the situation here. Then next, I will make a trip to shopkeeper Xiao's residence and ask that old fellow in detail. Qin Yining shook his head and said, that is not appropriate. It is best to observe in secret. When the time comes, Wang Fei. Qin Yining's words were interrupted by Ji Yun, who suddenly came to reply, there is a shopkeeper outside. He says he is one of shopkeeper Xiao's subordinates and has come to report to you. Hearing this, Qin Yining and Master Zhong looked at each other in surprise. Master Zhong smiled coldly and said, I did not expect him to understand. That way, we won't have to waste twice the effort to do it. Qin Yining also nodded. In her heart, she really hoped that shopkeeper Xiao was not a traitor. Therefore, Qin Yining's attitude towards the person who came to report was somewhat anxious. The sound of footsteps came from outside. Master Zhong immediately stood up and lowered his posture in front of Qin Yining. He stood with his head bowed as he replied. Qin Yining knew that Master Zhong wanted to establish her authority in front of outsiders, so she did not stop him. Not long later, the warm curtains were lifted and a young man who had not yet reached 20 walked in. He was wearing a cotton jacket with narrow sleeves and a black sheepskin vest. His clothes were new. Looking at his appearance, it was clear that he had not gotten used to this style of dressing. Seeing Qin Yining, he did not even dare raise his head. He lowered his head and knelt to greet her. This lowly one, Lu Deshun, greets Wang Fei. Please rise. There is no need to be so courteous. Qin Yining ordered for tea to be served. She then said to Master Zhong, you should also sit. Let's all sit down and talk. Yes, many thanks Wang Fei. Master Zhong cooperated and sat down in his previous position. He only dared to sit to the side. Lu Deshun saw that even Master Zhong, who was dressed in silk and looked very dignified, was so careful. He also copied Master Zhong and sat down sideways. Qin Yining asked, have you come here to report something? Replying to you, it was head shopkeeper Xia who sent me. Head shopkeeper Xiao's body is not well and it is not convenient for him to come out. He was also worried that Wang Fei might not understand some things. Chapter 664. Qin Yining thought that she treated her subordinates well, but now it seemed that when she couldn't take care of them, her subordinates not only didn't treat her as their master, but also guarded against her as an aristocrat of a hostile country. This was really, based on her understanding of the Yuqi Yan, he didn't have the ability to stir up the people of the old capital and the south who had already submitted to Dezhou to restore the country. It seemed that Gu Shixiang hadn't grown old yet. He was good at stirring up emotions and muddying the waters. The people were simple and kind. They supported Gu Shixiang and the Yuqi Yan because of their beliefs. However, the Yuqi Yan and Gu Shixiang wanted to start a war because they wanted to restore the country and stabilize their power. They stirred up the people to achieve their goals, but they didn't consider that if a war really broke out, the people would be the ones to suffer. Qin Yining still remembered what Pang Xiao had said to her when the Tiger Army had attacked the city. At that time, he had disguised himself as an ordinary farmer and come to the city to see her. He had even made her cold noodles. That day, Pang Xiao had said that he was fighting on the battlefield to end the tyrannical rule as soon as possible, to let the people's lives return to the right path, to develop the economy, and to let the people live peaceful lives. Even now, Pang Xiao's beliefs hadn't changed. Unfortunately, there weren't many people who could understand his true intentions. Even many of the people who had started the uprising with Pang Xiao were now blinded by fame and fortune. They only thought about fame and fortune. As a result, Pang Xiao was still misunderstood by others. Shopkeeper Lu was like this. Perhaps shopkeeper Xia, who claimed to be sick and refused to appear, was also like this. Qin Yining felt that Pang Xiao was wronged and felt that it wasn't worth it. However, she could understand. That was how people were. She couldn't force others to understand Pang Xiao the way she did. Qin Yining's thoughts turned thousands of times. She had thought of so many things in the span of a breath. Lu Dashun saw that Qin Yining was not speaking, so he raised his head uneasily. He quickly glanced at Qin Yining before quickly lowering his head again. He originally wanted to observe the expression of the Prince Zhongshuan's consort so that he could analyze the situation and report back to head shopkeeper Xia. Who knew that with just a quick glance, his heart and soul would be captivated by the beautiful female lead in front of him. Not only was his heart pounding, his brain was completely unable to think. There was actually such a beautiful woman in this world. If he were to stand next to her, wouldn't the difference be like that between a celestial immortal and a pile of mud? Prince Zhongshuan really had good luck with women. Lu Dashun lowered his head, not daring to express the thoughts in his heart. But in front of a beautiful woman, not only was his heart softened, but he also could not help but want to show off a little. As such, Lu Dashun did not care about what Qin Yining asked, continuing, "I will tell you the truth. After all, the old capital used to be the capital of the Yan dynasty. Ever since it came under the control of the Dezhou dynasty, it has been specially garrisoned with troops. Last year, Your Majesty caused a ruckus about the treasure, and there was also an earthquake. The citizens, who had already experienced a famine, suffered even more. The land was dry, and there were constant wars. The harvest of the crops was also difficult. You know all of this. So when old Master Gu and the county king of Yan returned, it was as though everyone had a pillar of support. Now, even the beggars on the streets know that if they want to have food to eat and clothes to wear, they still have to rely on the county king of Yan." Qin Yining nodded. He did not doubt Lu Dashun's words. Lu Dashun continued, "There is also the army. There are so many soldiers stationed outside the city. The pressure on the citizens is not just a little bit. Everyone is a little worried. If the army insists that the county king of Yen is plotting a rebellion and invades, everyone will not stand much of a chance of winning even if they resist. Moreover, the army is not completely united. Lu Dashun had unknowingly spoken about the situation that the citizens did not dare to discuss in private. Qin Yining did not try to interrupt him. Instead, he nodded appropriately in response. This led Lu Dashun to tell Qin Yining everything that he had seen and heard in the old capital. After he finished speaking, he quickly raised his head and met Qin Yining's eyes. Lu Dashun then remembered, somewhat absent-mindedly and worriedly, that he seemed to have said many things that he should not have said. He was afraid that he might have said something that would incur the wrath of Prince Zhongshuan. If these words were to reach the ears of the Emperor of Dezhou, then wouldn't the citizens of the old capital be killed? Cold sweat immediately appeared on Lu Dashun's face. Even his back was drenched in sweat. His legs went weak, and he fell to his knees with a thump. The person who had been speaking confidently just a moment ago was now kneeling in front of him with sweat on his forehead in the blink of an eye. Qin Yining did not need to think to know what Lu Dashun was thinking. She did not want to make things difficult for him, so she changed the topic. How is business at the shop? How is the farm's harvest? Lu Dashun was startled by the question. He shook his head and said, I don't know. Oh. It's almost the new year. Have the caravan and Chaoyang stopped doing business? She had a lot of businesses, especially the large amounts of land that needed to be transported. After a long time, she naturally had a deep relationship with the Jianghu. Who knew that Lu Dashun would still shake his head and say, Princess, I don't know about this either. Normally, these things are not for me to manage. Qin Yining had originally been able to calm down and treat people with generosity. Now, he also began to frown. If head shopkeeper Xia had arranged for this person to come as a show of force, then he had already achieved his goal. He had not seen the accounts that he should have seen, and he had not asked the questions that he should have asked. When he asked about business, he did not know anything. He was able to talk about some random rumors. Arranging for this person to come, if it was not a show of force, then it was clearly a perfunctory act. Yet she could not do anything to Lu Dashun. To the side, Master Zhong had already become furious after hearing this. He scolded Lu Dashun to his face, How are you doing your job? Your head shopkeeper Xia is not a stupid person, but he chose to use you. Since you're here, you should answer properly. Could it be that you forgot who your boss is? I didn't forget, but I really don't know. I have only just been promoted to shopkeeper. I have not come into contact with these things. Master Zhong had been in the business world for many years. His aura was not to be underestimated. Lu Dashun's face turned ashen from fear. He collapsed to the ground, not knowing what to do. Qin Yining rubbed his brow. Forget it. Let him go. Master Zhong gritted his teeth. Princess, could it be that this person shouldn't? Without waiting for Master Zhong to finish speaking, Qin Yining shook his head and sighed. We are not bandits. There is no way for everyone to acknowledge us. Since our paths are different now, there is no need to waste any more emotions. Let him go back. Only then did Master Zhong give up. He said in a low voice, You can go. Lu Dashun hurriedly got up and bowed to Qin Yining in order to maintain his dignity. Only then did he hurry out. Regardless of how Lu Dashun replied, Qin Yining frowned. The situation is so unusual. It seems that we can only use the power and manpower that my grandmother left behind. Chapter 665. When Qin Yining thought of Duchess Ding, she couldn't help smiling. Even her eyes became soft. Actually, I haven't contacted her during this time. But when Grandma handed over the Qin Tian alliance to me and led the family to the south, she told me her plan. She also left some people in the old capital. She asked me to contact her if I had any difficulties. Master Zhong was filled with emotion. He couldn't help but say with admiration, Duchess Ding has great foresight and has always been good at planning. It's really admirable. Qin Yining nodded in agreement. Grandma not only has brains, but also courage. If only I could be like Grandma. Qin Yining could never forget the tragedy of the Sun family when Duke Ding's mansion was destroyed. When the womenfolk lost hope, Duchess Ding not only became their backbone and led them to survive, but also joined the Qin Tian alliance and became the leader. She also avenged the men of the Sun family. Qin Yining naturally didn't want anything to happen to the Pang family. But Pang Zhao's current position was really comparable to that of the Sun family, which was famous on the surface. Qin Yining was very worried. She was afraid that something would happen to her family and Pang Zhao. She was also afraid that she didn't have the courage and perseverance to support the whole inner residence. Therefore, Duchess Ding had always been Qin Yining's role model. Master Zhong laughed. Princess, why are you so modest? Aren't you the same as Duchess Ding now? I'm still far from it. I'm not as strong as Grandma in my heart. But you're only 28 years old. Duchess Ding may not have your ability at your age. Qin Yining smiled and waved her hand. Master Zhong's praise made her feel ashamed. Obviously, Qin Yining didn't have such strong confidence in herself. There's something I need you to do in person. Princess, just tell me. Qin Yining leaned close to Master Zhong and whispered, go and find out if there's a Zheng's textile shop in the old capital. If you find it, go in and find the shopkeeper. Tell him that Madame Zheng's granddaughter wants to find her grandmother and has something to discuss. Master Zhong immediately understood that Duchess Ding's maiden name was Zheng. Yes, I'll go out now. Qin Yining nodded with a smile. You can take the people you trust with you. Pay attention to change your clothes and don't be found out. Master Zhong immediately nodded. Yes, I understand. When Master Zhong went out to find Zheng's textile shop, Qin Yining went back to the inner room to breastfeed the baby. Zhao Gu and Han Gu had different temperaments. Zhao Gu was quieter and didn't make a lot of noise. He slept more than Han Gu. Even when he woke up, he just opened his eyes wide and looked around curiously. When he saw Qin Yining, he would grab Qin Yining's long hair and play with it. The little red mole between his eyebrows made his small face look as cute as a baby in a New Year's painting. Han Gu was more lively and liked to act like a spoiled child. Even if the wet nurse was by his side all the time, he would still babble and make noises to attract the attention of the people around him. When he saw Qin Yining, he would even grin until his saliva flowed out. He was also very clingy. When he reached Qin Yining's arms, he wouldn't let go. The two children were like carved jade. Qin Yining reclined on the soft couch and played with one, then the other. When she reached out a hand, one child grabbed her finger and the other grabbed her light blue brocade sleeve. Qin Yining turned around and smiled at Bing Tang. Look at them. Bing Tang handed the warm handkerchief in his hand to Qin Yining and then supported himself on the edge of the bed to look at the two children in swaddling clothes. Qin Yining gently wiped the children's small hands and sighed softly. Wang Fei, what's wrong? Nothing, it's just that Wang Yi likes daughters. Next time, he will try to give Zhao Gu and Han Gu a little sister. Bing Tang was speechless. His lips moved, but in the end, he just nodded. There will be. The future is still long. Yes, it's still long. Qin Yining handed the handkerchief back to Bing Tang and continued to lie on the couch and play with the two children. Does Zhao Gu like little sisters? What about Han Gu Bing Tang dragged the cold handkerchief and retreated. He stood in the corridor and took a deep breath of the cold air. After holding it for a while, he exhaled. Wang Fei still didn't know that Wang Yi had decided not to have children in the future. Bing Tang touched the porcelain bottle in his sleeve and his fingers gradually clenched. The medicine that Pang Xiao wanted had already been made. If they took this medicine, who knew if they would have the chance to have children in the future? In Bing Tang's view, sterilizing a man was as cruel as depriving a woman of the right to have children. Perhaps she could weaken the medicine's effect and do some research to make it into a short-term sterilization medicine. That way, when Wang Fei was older and more mature, Wang Yi would still be in the prime of his life. If they wanted to have a daughter, it would be possible. Thinking of this, Bing Tang immediately made a decision and planned to reconfigure it. Thinking about how Pang Xiao was worried that Qin Yining would suffer during childbirth, he didn't plan to use external help and completely cut off the hidden danger from himself. He didn't even want a concubine's son or daughter. Such deep love moved her, the only person who knew. For Pang Xiao's health and their future as husband and wife, Bing Tang decided to try again. Qin Yining naturally didn't know what Bing Tang was going to do. She had always been generous to the people around her. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, Chiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou all took their own shifts. Bing Tang was often immersed in medical research, so she never asked them how they took their shifts. Qin Yining accompanied the two children for a while. Not long after, there was a rush of footsteps outside the door. A servant girl responded, "Wang Fei, Master Zhong is here." Qin Yining sat up in surprise, so fast. She quickly walked to the front hall. Just as she lifted the bead curtain hanging down from the floor, she saw Master Zhong standing there with a strange expression on his face. The person who had been in high spirits and full of smiles when he came out was now pale and his eyes were slightly red. "What's wrong? Did things not go well?" Qin Yining worriedly walked closer. Master Zhong nodded. His throat was so dry that it was like sandpaper. He forced himself to swallow a mouthful of saliva to moisten his throat before saying with difficulty, "Wang Fei, something happened at Jingji's textile shop." Qin Yining's pupils shrank slightly. "What happened?" "The textile shop has put up white linen and mourning flags. All the workers who come and go are wearing mourning clothes. When I went there, their shopkeeper wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I carefully asked around, but their workers are all very tight-lipped. I couldn't find out anything. Later, I went to the backyard of their shop. There were also mourning flags flying. After waiting for a while, I finally found an old farmer who was delivering vegetables to them. I heard that their old master passed away." Qin Yining's heart jumped when he heard this. His body swayed and he grabbed the armrest of the chair beside him. He forced himself not to fall and forced himself to remain calm. "You said their old master passed away. Who is the old master they are talking about?" Master Zhong's complexion wasn't much better than Qin Yining's. He looked at Qin Yining with a bit of fear in his eyes. He shook his head and said, "Wang Fei, I can't be sure." Qin Yining slowly sat down in the round-backed chair behind him. His knuckles gradually turned white as he gripped the armrest of the chair. His eyes stared unblinkingly at Master Zhong as he said in a low voice, "It can't be. It can't be maternal grandmother. Even though maternal grandmother is old, her body is healthy. But she's healthy, so she should be fine. She should be fine." His voice became lower and lower until it fell on his lips like a mosquito. She didn't believe that something would happen to someone as strong as Duchess Ding. However, it was normal for people to get old and die of illness. No matter how powerful maternal grandmother was, she wasn't an immortal. Who could bear such a big thing that happened in Duke Ding's mansion? In one night, her husband, son, and grandson all died an unnatural death. The future of all the weak women in the family was on her shoulders. Even a person made of iron wouldn't be able to bear it, right? Qin Yining's nose was sour and her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She bit her lower lip to stop her tears from falling. She couldn't panic. She couldn't panic. Now that Pang Shao wasn't by her side, the whole family was waiting for her to take charge of the situation. If she panicked first, what about the others? She still had 2 children to protect. After taking several deep breaths, Qin Yining suppressed the surging tears. Now that the situation was unclear, she had to find out for herself to be at ease. However, she couldn't let others find out that she was involved with Zhang's textile shop. Thinking of this, Qin Yining stood up and said, "Master Zhong, please wait here for a moment. Let me change my clothes. Later, you and I will go and take a look together." "Yes." Master Zhong nodded heavily. Seeing that Qin Yining was as calm as usual and didn't panic at all and was still full of confidence, Master Zhong was slightly relieved. No matter what, as long as she didn't panic, everything would be fine. Qin Yining went to the inner room and ordered Xian Yun, "Prepare my male clothes." Then she looked at Bing Tang, "I'm going out. I'll leave the 2 children to you." "Yes. Princess Consort, don't worry." Seeing that Qin Yining was so serious, everyone also became anxious. They put away their thoughts of sitting and laughing together and helped Qin Yining change his clothes. Qin Yining tied her chest with a white cloth, put on a loose Taoist robe, put on a cloak with a black sable fur collar, and put on a mole at the corner of her left eye. With only a slight change, Qin Yining turned into a feminine and handsome young master. Half of her face was buried in the sable fur collar. If she was not standing in front of someone who was very familiar with her, no one would be able to recognize her. Qin Yining only took Jingzhu with her. She went out to find Master Zhong and left through the back door. She went out and took a carriage to Zhang's textile shop. The atmosphere in the carriage was extremely tense. Master Zhong had been familiar with Duchess Ding for a long time, and they got along well. Who knew that something like this would happen? Thinking of the past, Master Zhong felt very uncomfortable. Qin Yining forced herself to be calm, but in fact, she was very worried. She couldn't show her fear too obviously, so she could only worry in her heart. Jingzhe sensed the atmosphere inside and urged the driver to speed up. Chapter 666. Wang, Gongzi, we've arrived. Outside the carriage was the driver left behind by Pang Shao. He had a straightforward personality and a quick mouth. He almost habitually called her Wang Fei. Fortunately, he immediately reacted and changed the way he addressed her. Qin Yining lifted the curtain and joked as he got off the carriage, "Gongzi Wang, this form of address sounds pretty good." The coachman blushed and bowed to Qin Yining with clasped hands. Qin Yining smiled and waved his hand. He didn't blame him at all. However, the originally tense atmosphere was greatly alleviated by Qin Yining's teasing. Even Chief Shopkeeper Zhong felt that the impetuousness in his heart had disappeared. Master Zhong and Jingzhe followed Qin Yining to the left and right. The 3 of them walked together to the entrance of Zhang's textile shop. The door was tightly shut. They could only see the white lanterns hanging high in the air. They walked along the wall to the back of the shop and could see the spirit flags hanging high above the wall. The air was filled with the smell of burning paper money. In the quiet alley, they could faintly hear a woman's suppressed sobs. Qin Yining closed his eyes. His heart became heavy again. He turned around to look at Master Zhong. Master Zhong immediately understood and went to knock on the door. After someone knocked on the door of the backyard, the courtyard immediately became quiet for a moment. Then, there was the sound of footsteps coming in. An old woman raised her voice and asked, "Who is it?" "We're here to see the shopkeeper of your shop," Master Zhong replied loudly. The old woman said, "Please wait a moment." Then she walked away. After a while, the door to the back of the courtyard was pushed open. Two older female servants stood on the left and right. Then, a beautiful woman in her prime walked out. The woman was dressed in plain clothes. She wore silver ornaments and white silk flowers on her head. There was also a white cloth belt around her waist. Her eyes were red and she looked quite delicate. Perhaps because she saw the three men standing outside the door, the woman was stunned. Qin Yining stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Are you the shopkeeper of this shop?" Qin Yining looked like a feminine and handsome young man in disguise. She purposely lowered her voice so that it was hard to distinguish the gender of a young man's voice. In addition, she did not bind her feet and her actions were free and easy, so it was impossible to see any flaws. The woman seemed to be on guard and politely returned the greeting. "I am indeed the shopkeeper of this small store. It's just that something happened at home, so I won't be doing business these few days. If young master needs anything, please come again in the future." Qin Yining nodded. Looking over the woman's shoulder, he saw that the courtyard was deathly pale. The woman frowned slightly in displeasure. She did not reprimand Qin Yining for his impoliteness on the spot because of the principle of business. She only said unhappily, "Young master, please go back." Qin Yining whispered in his original voice, "My grandmother is Duchess Ding." The woman was stunned and looked Qin Yining up and down in shock. "You?" Qin Yining turned around and took an exquisite carved mahogany box from Jingzhe and handed it to the woman. The woman looked up at Qin Yining suspiciously and then lowered her head to open the box. There was a golden seal on top of the box made of black velvet and a small booklet beside it. This was the golden seal used when Qin Yining was conferred the title of Prince Zhongshuan's consort. It was impossible to fake it just by looking at the material and workmanship. Qin Yining whispered, "Duchess Ding's granddaughter is Prince Zhongshuan's consort. Shopkeeper must know this." The woman came back to her senses and hurriedly nodded. She stepped to the side and let Qin Yining and his group into the courtyard. Then, she carefully closed the courtyard door. Qin Yining looked at the decorated morning hall in the courtyard. There was a black coffin in the hall and her hands and feet turned cold. After a long time, she said dryly, "Did something happen to my grandmother? Shouldn't she be in the south? Why is she in the old capital? What exactly is going on?" As she spoke, Qin Yining staggered towards the black coffin. Her heart was filled with terror and fear. Although she resisted, she wanted to see if her grandmother had really passed away. Who knew that when he got closer, he could clearly see that the coffin was empty. "Princess consort, old Madame Zheng is not dead yet, but she is in danger." Qin Yining quickly turned around and asked, "What exactly is going on?" "My surname is Ma. When old Madame ordered me to come to Zheng's textile shop, she had already instructed me that if her granddaughter, Prince Zhongshuan's consort, came to the textile shop one day to contact me, I must cooperate fully if she has any instructions. I must also inform old Madame in a timely manner." This time, when Prince Zhongshuan was appointed as the Grand Marshal and will be coming with his family, old Madame immediately came to the old capital in person. She was worried that Yu and Wang Yi had been away from the old capital for too long and would not be able to travel freely here. So, she came in advance to be the vanguard. Qin Yining was moved when she heard this. How was her grandmother worried that they would not be able to travel freely? She clearly understood the situation that she and Pang Xiao were in. She was worried that Pang Xiao, who had destroyed the Dian, would not be able to do well in the Yan dynasty's territory. She was thinking about them in every detail. As Qin Yining thought about it, her eyes became moist. Madame Ma continued, "Everything was fine at first, but who would have thought that old Madame would be caught 2 days after she settled down in the textile shop? Dianshi Gao from the Yamen came with his men and arrested old Madame for no reason. Old Madam and Dianshi Gao argued, but it was really difficult to argue with each other. Left with no choice, Old Madam instructed me to prepare a morning haul for her here before she left. She definitely did not plan well this time, so there was an 80% chance that she would not be able to come back. Once the morning haul was prepared, she would be able to leave with a light heart. Qin Yining's tears fell when she heard this. Madame Ma did not say it in detail, but she knew Duchess Ding's temper and could guess a thing or two. Madame Ma must have stood proudly in the garden and argued with reason without fear. After arguing for a while, she was prepared to die proudly. Why didn't you come to me for such a big thing? Qin Yining's voice was a little sharp. Madame Ma waved her hand repeatedly. It's not that I didn't want to look for you, but old Madam instructed that if you didn't come here in person, we were absolutely not allowed to take the initiative to look for you. Qin Yining closed her eyes and felt moist and cold in her heart. Her grandmother did not intend to implicate her. Master Zhong's face was also heavy, and he almost burst into tears. Qin Yining gritted her teeth and said after a while, "How early was it that she was arrested? What explanation did the Yamen give?" "It has been a day and a night." The Yamen did not give any explanation. They only said that old Madam was suspected of colluding with the enemy and committing treason. They arrested her just like that. We used money and used our connections, but it was useless. This time, the Yamen did not like money. It seemed that they were determined to take old Madam's life. Chapter 667. Qin Yining helped Ma Shi up with both hands and said in tears, "That's my grandmother, how can I not save her? Also, she did it for me from the start. Please get up, don't kneel again." Ma Shi sobbed as she wiped her tears with her sleeve. She stood and carefully examined Qin Yining's expression. Seeing that she was truly planning to save her, she felt slightly reassured. Then she blushed. Qin Yining and old Madame Zheng were related by blood. She was just an outsider and did not have the right to say those words. It would seem that she was doubting Wang Fei's character. Ma Shi was slightly anxious and stammered as she explained, "Wang Fei, please forgive me. Just now, I was too worried about old Madam's situation, so I spoke. You are wholeheartedly concerned about my grandmother. How can I blame you?" Qin Yining gently interrupted her explanation and patted the back of her hand comfortingly. "Don't worry, I understand." Ma Shi raised her eyes and met Qin Yining's clear eyes that were filled with wisdom and tolerance. Her anxiety miraculously eased. Wang Fei was not that kind of person. She should trust her. The group entered the front hall. Qin Yining led Master Zhong and Jing Jie. Ma Shi only had an old mama with her. The others were sent to the yard. Ma Shi said in a low voice, "Speaking of this, Wang Fei and I can be considered distant relatives. My Yinyang is your second maternal aunt's distant cousin. However, my family rarely interacts with your second maternal aunt's maternal family, so we have never interacted with each other. My husband's surname is Fu. My husband is a Xiuzai and can be considered to have some talent. Originally, although our life as husband and wife was poor, it was also sweet and happy. However, the local bully took a liking to me and repeatedly came to our house to make trouble. My husband was so angry that he argued with the bully and was actually beaten to death." Ma Shi thought of the sad Wang Shi and sobbed. She sobbed and said, "I went to the Yamen to complain, but that bully's family knew a lot of powerful people. They used money, and the local county magistrate didn't care. In the court, they even accused me of not being a woman and seducing that bully. At that time, it was old Madame Zheng who came forward to settle the matter and save me. Madame Zheng is chivalrous. Apart from me, she also saved many people who had similar experiences as me. Our families were all ruined and we had nowhere to go. Madame Zheng arranged for us to work in her business to find a way to survive. Old Madame has given me a new lease of life. Now that something has happened to her, I'm devastated. I wish I could repay her kindness with my own body. It's a pity that I'm just a useless woman and can't do anything. When I saw the princess consort just now and learned of your abilities, it was as if I had seen a life-saving straw. In a moment of desperation, I did such a thing. If I have offended you in any way, please don't take offense. Qin Yining smiled and shook Ma Shi's hand. How can I take offense? You are a woman of affection and righteousness. To be able to support this business and have my grandmother place you in such an important position, it is clear that you are more outstanding than you think. So shopkeeper Ma doesn't have to belittle yourself. When Ma Shi heard Qin Yining's words, it was like she had eaten a bowl of iced sour plum soup during the hottest days of the summer. Her entire body felt comfortable. Thinking that such a noble person like the princess consort was willing to lower herself and patiently listen to her talk about the past, her heart was moved. She felt that old Madame Zheng's granddaughter was the same as old Madame Zheng, both kind and outstanding women. At this time, Qin Yining's mind had turned a few times. For Ma Shi to be placed in such a position by her grandmother, it could be seen that she was a trustworthy person. Her loyalty to her grandmother was not to be doubted. Adding on her performance just now, Qin Yining no longer had any defenses against Ma Shi. Qin Yining then ordered Master Zhong, head shopkeeper, please send someone to investigate and see how my grandmother is right now, and whether she is alive or dead. Also, find out the background of that Dianshi Gao, who is in his family, and what their character is like. Master Zhong nodded. I will arrange it now. Qin Yining ordered him, it is important to investigate, but you have to prioritize your own safety. After you investigate, go back to our home. I will also go home in a while. Yes. Don't worry, princess consort. I will take someone to change their appearance. Master Zhong's heart was warm. After bowing, he quickly walked out. Qin Yining turned his head and met Ma Shi's puzzled gaze. He smiled and explained, to solve the problem, you have to first understand the situation. Ma Shi nodded in understanding and said with some admiration, Princess Consort is knowledgeable and thoughtful. I panicked just now and didn't know what to do. How can you not panic when encountering this kind of situation? This is human nature. Qin Yining comforted Ma Shi and then got up to leave. Ma Shi knew that such a noble person must have a lot of other things to do. Although she felt much calmer with Qin Yining around, as if she had a backbone to do things, it was not appropriate for her to ask him to stay, so she sent him to the door. If there is any news, please send someone to tell me. Don't worry, I will. After the two said goodbye, Qin Yining and Jing Zhou went out together. After confirming that they were not followed, they returned to the old residence. If it was before, Qin Yining pursued efficiency when he went out to do things, he would not be in such a hurry to go home. But it was different now. There were two precious children at home that he was worried about. Unless it was necessary, Qin Yining did not want to let the two children leave his side for even half a step. He secretly returned to the Fu. When he reached his room, he didn't have time to change before he went to see how the two children were doing. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were with the wet nurse. Seeing Qin Yining come back, they came forward to bow and asked, Princess Consort, did things go well? Not very well. We still have to see the situation. Qin Yining took off his cloak and rubbed his hands. He didn't dare to get too close to the children. He was afraid that the cold air outside would hit them. The children's bodies were weak. It would be bad if they caught a cold. How are the children? Don't worry, Princess Consort. The two young masters fell asleep not long after eating. They are very obedient and don't make a fuss. Bing Tang saw that Qin Yining's fingers were red from the cold and said, this servant will help you change clothes first. You are still breastfeeding. It will be uncomfortable if you bind your chest for too long. And it hurts a lot. Qin Yining went to the inner room and changed out of his male clothing. He put on the honey-colored brocade jacket that he usually wore at home. He put on a white rabbit fur vest and a cotton skirt. Qin Yining took the ginger tea that Bing Tang handed over and took a sip. The slight spiciness of the ginger and the sweetness of the brown sugar perfectly mixed together. The warmth flowed from his throat to his stomach and his entire body felt warm. Qin Yining sighed comfortably. It's better to be at home. I might be used to the weather in the north. Even if it's snowing, I don't find it hard to endure. Now that I'm back in the south, I can't stand the wet and cold. Bing Tang laughed. Princess consort, you are married to a chicken and follow the chicken. After marrying Wang Yi, this northerner, you have become a northerner. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows. Little wench, when did you learn to have such a bad mouth? Huzi is also a northerner. In the future, we will become northerners together. Princess consort. You are not ashamed. Bing Tang stomped his feet. Qin Yining saw Bing Tang's cheeks turn red and knew that she and Huzi had a good relationship. He sighed lightly and said, now that the situation is unstable, Wang Yi has taken Huzi away. Your marriage has been delayed. I'm not in a hurry to marry him. Why are you saying this, princess consort? Bing Tang's face turned red. She lowered her head and didn't look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining thought of Duchess Ding, who was still in danger, and sighed with worry. What's wrong, princess consort? Are things not going well outside? Qin Yining was upset and had no one to talk to. Bing Tang was someone she trusted, so she told Bing Tang what she saw and heard at Zhang's textile shop. Chapter 668. How could Qin Yining not be worried that things would develop in an uncontrollable direction? However, it was useless for her to be anxious now. She could only wait for Master Zhong to find out the information before making the next step. Qin Yining vaguely felt that head shopkeeper Xiao's actions might have something to do with the arrest of Duchess Ding. Qin Yining and Bing Tang chatted to pass the time. During this time, the two children woke up once. Qin Yining went to feed them again. When she coaxed the two children to sleep, it was already time to light the lanterns. The vast courtyard of the Qin mansion was dark and gloomy. The chilly winter wind blew through, making a sound that sounded like sobbing. Qin Yining casually flipped through a book called Zhuan. In the compartment, several servant girls who were doing needlework were talking and laughing in low voices, which dispelled the desolation in the air. In reality, Qin Yining also felt uncomfortable living here. Her family had been prosperous for a time. Not to mention the master, there were hundreds of servants in such a large residence. When she was in charge of the family, Qin Yining could still vividly remember how she held meetings with the servants to mobilize them. However, how long had it been? Her in-laws' residence had become a gloomy old residence. Even if it was renovated, it couldn't hide the emptiness of the residence. Qin Yining hadn't lived in this residence for long. It wasn't even as long as the time she had lived alone in the cave on the mountain. However, this residence had memories that she would never forget. She had parents and a family here. Although there were times when she fought with Qin Yining and times when she was sad because of her mother's unhappiness and the old madam's unfairness, looking back now, those small matters of needlework really weren't worth mentioning. As long as it didn't involve life and death, she could easily let go. Qin Yining stared blankly at the carved lattice on the window lattice. She didn't recover until Bing Tang gently nudged her. What's wrong? Wang Fei, Master Zhong is back. Please come in. Qin Yining calmed himself down and ordered Bing Tang to invite her in. He also asked Ji Yun to light up the candles in the main hall. When Master Zhong saw Qin Yining, he first bowed and then said in a low voice, "Wang Fei, fortunately, I did not disappoint you. I have already investigated the background of that historian Gao." Warden Gao was 49 years old at the time. He was in charge of the local prison and yamen. Although he was a low-ranking official, he had a lot of power. All the locals treated him with respect because he was the kind of person who would not be sweet when making sugar, but sour when making vinegar. Duchess Ding was taken away by him and is now being held in prison. "Maybe you can find out about my grandmother. How is he doing now?" "I can't find out anything about that. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, I didn't dare to investigate in detail." Qin Yining nodded understandingly. "I was too anxious." No, Wang Fei was worried about the old madam. The two sighed at each other again. Qin Yining asked again, "Did you investigate the situation of historian Gao's family?" "I did. Historian Gao's family has only one son for 3 generations. It was especially difficult for him to have a son in his generation. He took many concubines, but he only had a son when he was 30 years old. He doted on his son like a treasure. It was like he was afraid that the child would melt in his mouth and fall in his hands. Perhaps it was because historian Gao was too indulgent with his son and no one in the family dared to raise any objections. Young Master Gao was spoiled beyond recognition. He chased after chickens and dogs all day long. It was really annoying. When Master Zhong said this, the image of an arrogant and willful playboy appeared in front of him. Qin Yining did not need to think to understand what kind of person this person was. Recently, before and after historian Gao was arrested, did the manor contact anyone? "I didn't find out. If someone wanted to secretly incite historian Gao to do something, I might not be able to find out." Qin Yining nodded in agreement and fell into deep thought for a moment. If he wanted to save his grandmother, he must first find out why she was arrested. It was no longer the Dian dynasty. Therefore, even if his grandmother did the most outrageous thing, becoming the leader of the Qing-Tian alliance, it could not be considered a rebellion. Moreover, this time, she helped Li Qitian take back the throne. The power of the Qing-Tian alliance had to be used. Now, it could be said that the Qing-Tian alliance's existence had been recognized for the time being. Therefore, for the time being, it could be ruled out that she was arrested for the Qing-Tian alliance. This was the territory of the Yuqi-Yen. The Yuqi-Yen had a smart counselor like Gu Shixiang. Therefore, Qin Yining could basically conclude that the reason for his grandmother's arrest was the same as what he had analyzed at the beginning. It must be because of Pang Xiao. In this way, if he wanted to make the Yuqi-Yen let go, he had to think of a way. Master Zhong had also thought of Qin Yining's analysis. Since he could not directly rescue his grandmother, Master Zhong was in a difficult situation. "Princess, why don't we ask Wang Yi? Anyway, the military camp is not far from us. If Wang Yi is willing to speak, solving the problem is just a matter of a sentence." Qin Yining gradually frowned as he listened. He seemed to have found the answer to the question that he had not thought through clearly in his mind. Perhaps this was what Gu Shixiang was waiting for. If he couldn't think of a way, he would definitely ask Pang Xiao. As long as Pang Xiao appeared, Gu Shixiang could fabricate any crime and Pang Xiao would be framed. Li Qitian seemed to have a good relationship with them on the surface. However, in reality, he was also worried that he would not be able to get hold of Pang Xiao's weakness. If Gu Shixiang could create a weakness for Li Qitian to use, how could Li Qitian refuse? Although this matter was important, it would not be too late to get rid of the troublemaker after Pang Xiao had settled the matter in the south. With this analysis, Qin Yining was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. "We can't do that. We can't ask Wang Yi." Qin Yining told Master Zhong what he had just analyzed with a serious expression. Master Zhong was also anxious when he heard this. What should we do? This won't work. What other ideas do we have? Don't panic. We can think of ideas. We have to think of a way to solve the problem ourselves. We can't always rely on Wang Yi. Now that we know what the County King of Yen and Gu Shixiang are after, we know that grandmother's life will not be in danger before they achieve their goal. This period of time is enough for us to take action. Thinking about it carefully, it made sense. Master Zhong nodded and said, Your Highness is right. Then we will do as you say. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then asked Master Zhong, that historian Gao's only son, what kind of person is he? Your Highness, that person is really a man who doesn't abstain from anything. Even though he was not yet 20 years old, his shadow could be seen everywhere among the flowers. Last year, he had hooked up with an actress who played the role of Dan, and they had made a solemn vow of love. However, as soon as Judge Gao cut off young Master Gao's money, young Master Gao immediately abandoned that weak little actress. The next day, that actress's body was found in the river. It was said that the man's manhood was cut off. In short, it was very tragic. However, young Master Gao, who had made a solemn vow of love with her, did not care and found a new lover. Recently, young Master Gao took a liking to a girl with the surname Yu. The girl did not like him, so he plotted against young Master Yu's father to kill him. He even had solid evidence. Old Master Yu refused to plead guilty and was beaten to death in court. Old Master Yu could not take it anymore and passed away. That's not all. Young Master Yu and her 8-year-old sister were sold to Yi Chui Pavilion. The brothel keeper took young Master Gao's money and used young Master Yu's sister as a threat to force young Master Yu to accept customers. Young Master Gao took the opportunity to appear and play the hero to save the damsel in distress. He visited her every day and played with her high sentiments. However, young Master Yu still did not like young Master Gao and refused to accept him. I think young Master Gao will not be able to tolerate it for much longer. Qin Yining was dumbfounded. Such a scum is still alive in this world. This is really... However, I think I have a solution. Chapter 669. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin Kanji Factory. Qin Yining smiled, just follow my instructions and you'll know. Ever since I became pregnant, Wang Yi has not allowed me to use my brain to do anything. I've been content with the status quo for too long and haven't done anything for a long time. My skills have become rusty. Master Zhong laughed heartily when he heard this. Seeing that Qin Yining had a card up his sleeve, he relaxed a little. Qin Yining said, Tomorrow, follow my instructions and invite Liao Zhibing over. As he spoke, he whispered a few words into Master Zhong's ear. Master Zhong nodded solemnly, I'll definitely do it for you. It was getting late, so Master Zhong took his leave to rest. After he left, Qin Yining returned to his bedroom. However, he was unable to sleep for most of the night. As this matter concerned his grandmother, Qin Yining did not dare to be negligent in the slightest. She carefully analyzed her entire plan from the beginning to the end, and imagined many unexpected situations in her mind, as well as how to deal with them when she encountered them. In the end, he was too tired and fell asleep in a daze. The next day, Liao Zhibing brought Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinua along with Master Zhong to meet with Qin Yining. Qin Yining ordered people to invite everyone into the front hall of the Qin Manor. He also ordered the guards to guard the surroundings to prevent anyone from eavesdropping. Only then did he say, When you came, you weren't followed, right? Zhao Wanjin laughed loudly, a lion's head, don't worry. Have you forgotten what we brothers used to do? Before we came, we already saw the situation outside clearly. I don't think anyone will find out. Qin Yining smiled and nodded, that's good. I called you all here today because I have an important matter to attend to. Alliance head, please instruct us. Qin Yining led the people of the Qing Tian Alliance to help Li Qiqian take back the throne. The Qing Tian Alliance could be considered to have officially shown itself in front of the current emperor. They had been viewed as rebels in the Dian, but now they had become loyal officials who could help the emperor. This sense of accomplishment was indescribable for them. Liao Zhibing and the Zhao brothers were in high spirits and full of hope for the future. Seeing this, Qin Yining felt more confident. He first told them about the news of Duchess Ding's wife being arrested, then he told them about Librarian Gao and young Master Gao. Finally, he told them what he wanted them to do. Qin Yining. After some observation, I found that the citizens of the old Dudu city are not living due to the chaos caused by the war and natural disasters. Many citizens have problems eating. Therefore, I plan to set up a kanji factory in the city to provide kanji to the people. Firstly, it could help many commoners. Secondly, it will make it easier for me to carry out the next step of my plan. This is killing two birds with one stone. Liao Zhibing, Zhao Wanjin, Zhao Yinhua, and Master Zhong were somewhat confused. However, since Qin Yining had given them the order, they trusted Qin Yining's methods. They had done so many things with Qin Yining in the past, which was enough to prove that Qin Yining had the foresight and decision-making ability that others did not have. In addition, after getting along with each other for many days, they trusted Qin Yining's character. They knew that he was not the kind of master who would disregard the lives of his subordinates to achieve his goals. Qin Yining's previous good character and smart and decisive means were exchanged for the wholehearted trust of her subordinates now. Without any doubts, everyone nodded. Since Alliance Head has made such a decision, he must have thought about everything. Brothers, let's do as he says. That's right. It's just that after setting up the porridge factory, we'll have to feed so many citizens. It's going to cost a lot of money. Qin Yining smiled and said, I still have so many fields and lands to harvest. If we transfer a portion of the money earned from the grain and land, we'll be able to save many lives. Furthermore, I do have other plans for giving out porridge this time. This can be considered killing two birds with one stone. Yes. Since Qin Yining had made the decision, everyone nodded in unison. Master Zhong said, Boss, don't worry. I'll go and transfer the money and grain. After Qin Yining nodded, Master Zhong took his leave. Qin Yining said to the three people in the room, this time, I don't want to open the porridge factory under Wang Ye's name. Instead, I want to open it under the name of a foreign merchant. Why is that? This time, Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua couldn't help but raise their voices. Alliance Head, this is such a good opportunity to make a name for yourself. This is such a good thing. If you do it, you'll be able to accumulate good karma for your family. Why do you have to keep it a secret? Thinking about the current situation, Qin Yining smiled bitterly and shook his head. Actually, how could I not want to help Wang Yi gain a good reputation? It's just a pity that the current political situation is very tense. The situation in the south is also very chaotic. I don't dare to act rashly and delay Wang Ye's important matters. Besides, setting up the porridge factory is only one aspect of my plan. The most important thing is that I want to save my grandmother. After thinking about it, I feel that this plan is very feasible. The manager of the porridge factory is a kind-hearted and wealthy merchant from outside the country. I'll need your help. Alliance Head, don't worry. It's our duty to help. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua were both born bandits. They were straightforward and full of masculinity. In comparison, Zhao Wanjin was more experienced and tactful than Zhao Yinhua. He was used to judging the situation and observing his surroundings. As such, Qin Yining gave the task to Zhao Wanjin and whispered a few words into his ear. Zhao Wanjin nodded as he listened. At first, he didn't understand what Qin Yining's plan was, so he was a bit depressed. But now, after hearing Qin Yining's analysis and plan, Zhao Wanjin's depression disappeared. All that was left was admiration. Zhao Wanjin nodded again and again. "O lion's head, don't worry. I'll definitely do everything for you." "Alright, then I'll have to trouble you." Qin Yining sent the guests off with tea. Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhuo also left the residence. Over the next 2 days, a temporary porridge stall was set up in one of the most spacious open spaces in the capital. All the food that could be found was brought out. The mixed grains and beans were boiled into pots of thick porridge. The aroma of the food wafted through the air. Without needing to call for help, countless homeless people gathered around. Zhao Wanjin shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, quiet down and listen to me. Don't crowd around. Later, everyone will have a share. Everyone will have a share. Can you guarantee that?" The commoners were doubtful. Zhao Wanjin slapped his thigh and made a bow with his hands clasped in front of him. He said in a clear voice, "This one is Qian Gui, a merchant from the north. Although my family is not very rich, everyone who knows me knows that the current situation is not good. However, I am used to helping people. I do not lack food and drink. However, I also hope that the commoners can eat their fill." There was no way around it. With so many citizens gathered together, the government was worried that there would be a mass uprising. However, seeing the citizens lining up in an orderly manner, and the rich boss, Qian, not using the government's money or asking the government for help, everyone was happy to see this kind act. Qin Yining would ride out every day at noon. When he saw the kanji factory, he would stop for a moment. She acted like a curious and kind passerby. She didn't make any eye contact with Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhuo. No one would have guessed that the boss behind the scenes of the kanji factory was her. On the 4th day of the kanji factory's opening, Yu Qiyan and Gu Shixiang also came to see the situation. They had originally thought that a normal person wouldn't be able to support such a large act of kindness in a day or two. They had specially come to see if there was any possibility of them not being able to continue. But when they arrived at the kanji factory, the kanji was still thick, and the rice used was also of good quality. The citizens had become friendly with Boss Qian. Some of the pitiful widows and widows even wore thick cotton jackets. It was obvious that someone had just given them to them. Seeing this, Gu Shixiang shook his head and said, "It looks like this boss really knows how to win people's hearts." Yu Qiyan shook his head and said, "There are still many good people in this world. I think this righteous person is just warm-hearted." "Is that so?" Gu Shixiang shook his head and said disapprovingly, "Who would be so warm-hearted to continuously give so much money to unrelated people to eat? Also, even if he is warm-hearted, there's no need to go bankrupt, right? I don't see this person with a big background." Yu Qiyan didn't like Gu Shixiang saying this and couldn't help but purse his lips. However, Gu Shixiang was his backbone now. He couldn't contradict him directly, so he could only endure. Chapter 671. When Gu Shixiang heard Yu Qiyan's delighted voice, his heart felt stifled. He had tried so hard to persuade him several times, but it was all in vain. Yu Qiyan didn't take it to heart at all. He could understand that young men were interested in beautiful women, but couldn't Yu Qiyan take a look at what kind of person she was? She was Prince Zhongshuan's woman, and she had just given birth to 2 children for Prince Zhongshuan. If she had him in her heart, that would be fine. The problem was that she didn't have him in her heart at all. She only wanted to help her husband and raise her children. Who knew when she would stab them with a knife? In terms of intelligence and scheming, Yu Qiyan couldn't compare to Qin Yining. Gu Shixiang was very afraid that Qin Yining would use a honey trap on Yu Qiyan. He was sure that as long as Qin Yining moved a finger, Yu Qiyan would rush up to him and help him count the money. Gu Shixiang's heart was filled with assisting Yu Qiyan to restore the Dian dynasty. However, the emperors of the Yan dynasty were getting worse with each generation. It made him mentally and physically exhausted. He even had a feeling that he wouldn't be able to complete this difficult task in his lifetime. Gu Shixiang thought about a lot of things, but he remained silent on the surface. Yu Qiyan didn't get a reply from Gu Shixiang for a long time, so he looked over in confusion. He still had an excited expression on his face, but when he saw Gu Shixiang's wrinkled face and his bottomless dark eyes, Yu Qiyan felt as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water on his heart. His original throbbing and enthusiasm turned into white steam at this moment. He almost heard a "chi" sound. Yu Qiyan was unhappy in his heart. He was, after all, the monarch of a country. Accepting remonstrances was his magnanimity and conduct as a monarch. However, if his subjects did not know their place and kept provoking his authority, it would be somewhat disrespectful. However, Gu Shixiang was a senior official of 3 dynasties. Even his father, the emperor, had to address him as old Grand Preceptor when he was still alive. There were many times when he needed to rely on Gu Shixiang's wisdom. Therefore, Yu Qiyan could only suppress his temper and say, "This king's words, Old Master Gu, did you not hear clearly?" He actually had the cheek to ask. Gu Shixiang was so angry that his beard was sticking up. If it weren't for the fact that he needed to save some face for Yu Qiyan in public, he really wanted to spit on his face. He was truly a pile of mud that couldn't be helped. Gu Shixiang suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, "This old man is old and his eyesight is blurry. I can't see clearly whether that was the Prince Zhongshuan's wife or not." Even though they were not far away, the old man could still see the words clearly even when he was reading, but now he was pretending to be blind. As a result, how could Yu Qiyan not understand what Gu Shixiang was trying to say? It seemed like he, the former emperor, was nothing in Gu Shixiang's eyes. He didn't care about him at all. Yu Qiyan was a stubborn person. After being mocked by Gu Shixiang, his heart was filled with anger. He immediately strode towards the carriage without a care for anything else. "Wang Yi, where are you going?" Gu Shixiang chased after him in shock. Yu Qiyan said, "Since I can't see clearly, then I'll go closer. If I can, I'll say hello." Gu Shixiang was so angry that he almost rolled his eyes. At this moment, Qin Yining was observing the situation at the kanji factory through a corner of the carriage's warm curtains. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Yu Qiyan striding over with an angry expression. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Could it be that Yu Qiyan knew that she was the one who caused the kanji factory incident? Otherwise, Qin Yining really couldn't think of a reason why Yu Qiyan would angrily come looking for her. Jing Zhe and the others beside the carriage also noticed that Yu Qiyan's expression was not right. They immediately surrounded Qin Yining in a well-trained manner. When Yu Qiyan saw Qin Yining, his ferocious expression finally relaxed. Looking at her slightly fuller cheeks after giving birth, she seemed to have more charm than before. Yu Qiyan couldn't stop his heart from beating wildly and his blood from boiling. Why is Wang Fei also here? Yu Qiyan forced himself to remain calm. Qin Yining smiled. "I was bored in the Fu, so I came out for a walk. I saw that this place was lively, so I stayed to take a look." Yu Qiyan smiled and said, "It's right to come out and take a walk. It'll prevent you from being lonely in the Fu." With one hand behind his back, he turned around and looked at the kanji factory. He smiled and sighed. "Our Dian people are all warm-hearted and kind-hearted. Look. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows. The people of the world are all the same. Human nature is good. However, Jinan Wang should also be more careful. How can we still address dying people here? Yu Qiyan originally wanted to show off and brag that the people of the Dian dynasty were more honest and kind-hearted than the people of the Dezhou dynasty. Who would have thought that Qin Yining would say such a thing to him? Yu Qiyan's original throbbing was extinguished. He felt an indescribable anger in his heart. It seems that you have forgotten who you are. Oh. Qin Yining said lightly, in the end, is it Jinan Wang who has forgotten, or am I the one who has forgotten? You are clearly a Dian, so why did you defect to Dezhou like your father? What benefits did Dezhou give you? Do you think that the Dian can't give you? You are doing this for your own selfish desires. You have even forgotten your roots. What a joke. Qin Yining sneered. Back then, it was you who handed over the letter of surrender and willingly became a subject. That was why my father was forced to migrate. Why are you speaking as if our family Qin specializes in producing traitors? My father is an upright person. When he does something, he will take it seriously to the extreme. When he was the prime minister and imperial tutor of the Dian dynasty, he was also like this. After the Dian was destroyed, he also focused on his own matters in Dezhou. However, I would like to ask Jinan Wang. If you really care about my family Qin so much and trust my father so much, why didn't you take him with you when you left? If I remember correctly, the old officials of the Yan dynasty who migrated to Dezhou were all taken care of by my father before they could gradually gain a foothold. Why, when you left my father behind to take the blame, did you not consider my father's feelings? Yu Qiyan was rendered speechless by Qin Yining's words. After a while, he squeezed out a sentence, your father is wholeheartedly loyal to your husband. How can I trust him? Then let me ask the Honorable Jinan Wang. Do you care about your throne, or do you care about the lives of the common people? Look at those common people. Qin Yining angrily pointed at the poor people who were receiving kanji from the kanji factory. News of the kanji factory had spread. Today, there were even more people who came. It looked like there were about 500 to 600 people. Influenced by etiquette, the common people also had integrity and backbone. As long as their family had enough food to eat and didn't starve to death, they would definitely not receive kanji from the government. If their neighbors or friends found out that they went to receive kanji even though their family didn't starve to death, they would be criticized behind their backs. Therefore, the 500 to 600 people present right now were all people who didn't have enough food to eat and were about to starve to death in this cold winter. Look at them. What they need is a stable life, to recuperate and build up their strength. They don't need the chaos of war. They don't need the men and their families to be forced to go to war from time to time. They don't need the old, weak, women, and children to be unable to farm. In the past, the fatuous ruler plundered the common people's wealth and used the money to save lives to create a treasure for himself. Do you want to learn from him? Chapter 672. Yu Qiyan's face turned red and his spine bent a little. Faced with Qin Yining's harsh criticism, he felt speechless for a moment. Because what Qin Yining said was indeed the truth. Gu Shixiang listened to them for a while and then sneered, I've never seen such an ignorant and stupid woman who is so good at talking. Qin Yining cast a sidelong glance at Gu Shixiang and ignored him. He only looked at Yu Qiyan's slightly red eyes and sighed. He softened his tone and said, Jinan Wang, I was a little rude just now, but what I said was from the bottom of my heart. It was also because I was your martial brother and sister that I felt that I was on good terms with you. That's why I spoke so bluntly. You are a noble and have never suffered much since you were young. You have never lived a precarious life, so perhaps you don't know that when I was struggling to survive in the marketplace, I didn't care about who the emperor was. At that time, all I thought about was whether I would be able to eat another meal after this one. If I fell asleep, I wouldn't be able to see the sun tomorrow. If I casually walked on the street, I would be put in a sack and sold to a place where I would no longer have freedom. An emperor who can give the people enough food to eat and live in peace is a good emperor. An emperor who can let the people live without fear and can walk on the street without fear is a good emperor. As for who sits on the throne, you can go and ask this group of people. Do they really care more about it than life and death? If you don't care about the lives and feelings of the people and only care about the status, after you ascend to the throne, will you lead the people in the country to starve? Which? Don't talk nonsense. Gu Shixiang angrily pointed at Qin Yining and scolded, don't rely on the fact that you are Pang Zhixie's wife to speak nonsense here. You have no integrity at all, and you still dare to say that you are doing this for the people. I don't think there is anyone in the world more shameless than you. Old Master Gu, please calm down. You are already married, so you should think more about yourself. How dare you? Even your father has to be polite in front of me. Looking at your behavior, this old man knows that although Qin Meng looks upright on the surface, he is probably a very filthy person in his heart. Qin Yining chuckled. He didn't want to argue with an old man, so he said calmly, I once heard people say that there are two kinds of greed in the officialdom that are the most detestable. One was greed for money, and the other was greed for fame. People who are greedy for fame are even more despicable than those who are greedy for money. Greedy people like to fill their own pockets and become the parasites of the country. They should be eliminated. Those who were greedy for fame only thought about how the history books would record them. They were not afraid of being killed or punished. They even used morality to kidnap the ruler of a country. They only wanted to leave their name in history and did not care about the lives of the people. Old Master Gu is very knowledgeable and has been in politics for a long time. I wonder if what I've heard is true. Gu Shixiang was so angry that his whole body trembled, but his face felt as if someone had slapped him. You, impudent. You're not a son. You're spouting nonsense. Qin Yining said in surprise, I've always respected you and been polite to you. I've only asked you a question, so why are you so agitated? You criticized my father and now you're criticizing me. I've never accused you of anything. Gu Shixiang was so angry that his ribs hurt. When Qin Yining used a fake map to confuse him, he already knew that this woman's cunning was beyond the understanding of normal people. Now that he was being criticized in front of everyone without using any vulgarities, how could he stand it? It seems like Prince Zhongshuan is sincerely trying to make things difficult for our Jinan Wang. Does this also represent Wang Ye's intentions? Gu Shixiang gritted his teeth. Qin Yining said, I've read history books before. In ancient times, whenever the emperors ate more meat, a group of ministers would write memorials to ridicule them. They said that the emperors were extravagant and didn't know how to be thrifty. Even if the emperors were stabbed, they would still smile and accept the admonition. How could old Master Gu be more noble than the emperors of ancient times? Oh, perhaps it's because his breadth of mind is different. As for those ministers who wrote the admonition, they closed their doors at home and ate all sorts of delicacies. They didn't do anything and emptied the national treasury. It's common for them to borrow all the money in the national treasury and not return it. They weren't extravagant and didn't know how to be thrifty. Qin Yining shook her head and sneered, what morals, what etiquette, when put in the mouth of a selfish person, it's nothing more than being lenient to oneself and strict to others. It's just a double standard. You. All right, that's enough. Yu Qiyan listened for a long time, but in fact, she was secretly pleased. Qin Yining's words were like pearls, each and every one of them directly hitting Gu Shixiang's weak spots. Although Qin Yining's words to him at the beginning were because she was angry at him for not being able to fight back, she was directly stabbing Gu Shixiang. It seemed that in Qin Yining's heart, he still had a place in her heart. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so clear about who was close and who was distant. Old Master Gu, please don't be angry. Prince Zhongshuan's wife also shouldn't say too much. If there's a difference of opinion, we can just discuss and solve it. There's no need to hurt our friendship. Yu Qiyan sweetly tried to mediate the situation. Gu Shixiang was about to faint from anger because of Yu Qiyan. Who was Qin Yining? She was Prince Zhongshuan's wife. What was Prince Zhongshuan doing in the south? He was going to be the Grand Marshal. Why did Li Qitian let Pang Shao be the Grand Marshal? Wasn't it because the south couldn't be chaotic right now? De Zhou couldn't support a situation where both sides were on fire. Therefore, the person who was most afraid of chaos in the south was Prince Zhongshuan. Yu Qiyan could totally use Pang Zhao's concerns to fiercely show off her power and fiercely seek benefits for herself. But now, they were being lectured by Prince Zhongshuan's wife one by one on the street. Every word was stabbing into their hearts. Not only did Yu Qiyan not get angry, she even tried to mediate the situation. It was obvious that Yu Qiyan was muddle-headed. What's more, did Yu Qiyan also agree with Qin Yining's words? Gu Shixiang thought back and his heart suddenly jumped. Did Yu Qiyan really think that he was the kind of person that Qin Yining said he was? Gu Shixiang's attention was distracted by the sudden panic. In order to help the Dian, Gu Shixiang had sacrificed the lives of his entire family. Now, he was the only one left in the Gu family. He was also at the age where the yellow soil had already reached his neck. He wholeheartedly wanted the Yu Qiyan to regain the throne. If at this time, Yu Qiyan still thought that he was the kind of person that Qin Yining said he was, then how could he live with himself in this life? Qin Yining met with Yu Qiyan and Gu Shixiang. Gu Shixiang's expression was the same as what she had expected. She helplessly sighed. She said goodbye to the two and ordered the carriage to set off for home. Yu Qiyan looked at the back of the group of people leaving. It took a long time for him to come back to his senses. Then he looked at the old official who looked like a frosted eggplant. His heart couldn't bear it. Master Gu, you are this king's most trusted and closest person now. You are also this king's only family member. You must take good care of yourself. In the future, this king will rely on you. Gu Shixiang heard this and suddenly raised his head. He carefully observed Yu Qiyan's expression. Seeing that he was quite sincere, the depression in his heart eased a little. Chapter 673. Master Zhong's spirits were immediately lifted. After waiting for so many days, all he saw was Qin Yining calmly giving out porridge. There was no further action, so he was already anxious. Master Zhong rushed out as if he was flying. From the back, he looked like a young man. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. After entering the room and feeding the two little guys who had just woken up, someone came in and reported, "Princess Consort, Prince Zhongshuan's bodyguard is back." Qin Yining's eyes lit up when he heard this. He hurriedly ordered, "Quickly invite them in." Seeing that Bing Tang was still holding Brother Han, he smiled and pulled her hand, "Come out with me." "Okay." Bing Tang didn't suspect anything and put the child down. Qin Yining pushed her to the front and winked at Ji Yun, Xian Yun, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou. The four of them looked at each other and understood. They couldn't help but urge Bing Tang, "Hurry up and go. Maybe Huzi is back." Bing Tang was embarrassed by their words. She turned around and glared at Qin Yining and the other four people, "You little bitches, you're all bad people. How do you know that Huzi is coming back?" Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. He put his arm around Bing Tang's shoulder and walked out. He laughed softly. Good sister, don't be angry. I'm just guessing. A day apart is like 3 years. Huzi went out with Wang Yi. Doesn't that mean that 6 years have passed? Princess consort is also bad people like them. Bing Tang's ears turned red. She stomped her feet and ran out quickly. Qin Yining turned around and laughed. You guys are too much. You know that Bing Tang is shy. Qiu Lu, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun are not young anymore. It's time for you guys to find good in-laws. When the time comes, aren't you afraid that she will make fun of you? Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Qiu Lu's faces turned red. They urged Qin Yining to go out, stop talking about others. Princess consort is the worst. Qin Yining chatted and laughed as he walked out of the door. When he arrived at the front hall, he saw Huzi standing straight on the floor, staring straight at the yellow rosewood official's chair. Bing Tang was standing behind the main seat, looking down without even raising his head. However, the two of them were clearly looking at each other from the corner of their eyes. Qin Yining was overjoyed. These two people were reading each other's faces. Qin Yining was afraid that the two of them were shy, so he didn't expose them. He smiled and walked towards the main seat. Hearing the footsteps, Huzi's expression changed. He cupped his hands and knelt on one knee. Princess consort. Get up. We're all family. There's no need to be so polite. Qin Yining waved his hand and sat down on the main seat. You sit down too. Bing Tang, bring some snacks and tea. Huzi must be hungry after rushing all the way back. Yes. Bing Tang secretly sighed in relief. She had been worried that Huzi would be hungry. Huzi grinned, showing his white teeth. His eyes were curved. Hee, then I won't be polite. Although his words were natural, he sat down at the end of the table. His posture was still straight. It was obvious that the habits cultivated in the military were deeply rooted. Bing Tang soon brought over a black double-beam tray. On top of the tray was a plate of cloud cake, a plate of red date cake, and a pot of wolfberry flower tea. These were all Huzi's favorites. Qin Yining smiled. Eat first. Fill your stomach and we'll talk later. Okay. Huzi didn't stand on ceremony with Qin Yining. He rushed back as fast as he could because he was really hungry. At this moment, Huzi grinned and picked up a plate of desserts with his big hands and stuffed them into his mouth, wolfing them down. Bing Tang was shocked by his table manners and felt a little distressed in her heart. She quickly poured him a cup of tea and handed it over. Huzi happily took the teacup. When his fingers touched Bing Tang's slender and cold fingertips, his heart rippled with sweetness. It was even sweeter than the snacks in his mouth. He smiled and said, "Thank you." He spat out the crumbs of the snacks. He seemed to realize that it was unsightly and quickly covered his mouth. He took a sip of tea and swallowed the snacks in his mouth. Qin Yining looked at the two of them. One was eating snacks and drinking tea, while the other was pouring tea with a gentle gaze. The air around them became sweet and thick. Some of the worry and hesitation in her heart disappeared. In this world, poverty, sneezing, and love were the most difficult things to hide. Bing Tang was a girl with a hard life. In her heart, she treated her like a younger sister. Seeing that they had such a good relationship, Qin Yining was relieved to hand Bing Tang over to Huzi. After Huzi finished the snacks, Bing Tang knew that they had something to say. She took the tray and left. Huzi then took out a letter and presented it to Qin Yining with both hands. Wang Fei, this is from Wang Yi. Everything in the military camp is fine. Wang Yi said that he misses you, Zhao Gu and Han Gu. Qin Yining smiled as she took out the letter. She opened it and quickly skimmed through it. Rather than calling it a letter to say that he was safe, it was more like a love letter. There were 2 whole pages. Only a few sentences said that the military camp was fine, that he was also fine, that he was in good health, and that he ate well. The rest of the letter was about how much he missed her. Chin Yining's face turned red as she read. She quickly folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Everything is fine at home. Go back and tell Wang Yi not to worry. Zhao Gu and Han Gu are also fine. Children grow quickly. They seem to have grown a bit in the past 2 days. I see that Zhao Gu's eyes are becoming more and more like Wang Ye's. Han Gu's mouth is also like his. In short, everything is fine. Tell Wang Yi not to worry and to focus on handling military matters. Tell him to return as soon as possible. Huzi nodded and said with a smile, Wang Fei, do you want to write a letter to Wang Yi? Chin Yining thought about the letter that was filled with words of love. Her face turned red. He wanted her to write a letter. Did she also have to write such words? She wanted to refuse, but then she thought about how Pang Xiao was probably waiting for her reply. Thinking of this, Chin Yining called Bing Tang to get a brush and ink. She then smiled and said, I'll think about what to write. You can all leave first. Bing Tang's face turned red. He stammered, Wang Fei, I'll stay and help you grind the ink. Chin Yining smiled and said, no need. I still need to think about what to write. Yes. Why don't the 2 of us go out for a walk? Huzi shamelessly invited. Bing Tang angrily stepped on his foot. He knew that Chin Yining was purposely creating an opportunity for them to talk. He was embarrassed, but he couldn't resist the temptation. He could only vent his anger on Huzi. He turned and left. Huzi was overjoyed from being stepped on. He scratched his head and smiled at Chin Yining. He turned and quickly chased after him. Hey, Tang Meng Meng, wait for me. His voice faded. Chin Yining listened and laughed. Bing Tang's name was Tang Meng Meng. When he first stayed by her side, he changed his name to avoid being noticed. Now that there was someone who could happily call her by her name, she would be happy too, right? Chin Yining took out Pang Zhao's letter and carefully read it. His face turned red from his heartfelt words, but he also carefully read his handwriting from beginning to end. His strength penetrated the back of the paper. There was no sign of weakness. He also didn't use anyone else to write for him. It could be seen that he wasn't injured. Chin Yining relaxed. He spread out the paper, ground the ink, and carefully wrote his reply. Occasionally, he could hear Bing Tang and Huzi whispering outside the door, "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.